Jack be nimble, Jack be quick. Jack jumps over the candlestick. Jack be nimble, Jack be quick. Jack jumps over the candlestick. A couple strolling take the air, and Jack leaps out cross Shadwell Square. Saw him clear as gin, she said. Thought we was done for, as good as dead. The man spoke out with considerate calm. There are monsters who mean us harm. Later on, thinking back of what did befall, a more colourful version they did recall. Attacked by the devil and left for dead. Then we went home and went to bed.
You're listening to the Mystic Menagerie podcast, your regular descent into the world of alternative entertainment, art, and culture. Bolt the door, light the fire, and pour yourself a glass of Virgin Rouge, and let your hosts, Dan Baines and Lord Freddie Valentine, guide you through the Stygian depths of your darkest delights. Warning. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to episode 10 of the Mystic Menagerie podcast. Today is the 17th of June 2015. I am Dan Baines and I'm joined by my co-host Freddie Valentine. Hi there, Freddie.
Hello. Good afternoon, evening, morning, or whatever time of day is you're listening.
Yeah, double figures, episode 10.
10, yeah, fantastic. 10 is it's quite a good thing. I mean, we didn't start that long ago, really. It seems to be quite short time to get to 10, really. So
it is. We've seen. Well, I think our first podcast show came out in October, and that we're now in June. So what are we? We're up to that's about 9 months. 9 months. So yeah, we're averaging one a month roughly, which is exactly what we wanted. It's more frequent than the magazine was, anyway.
Definitely. I mean, it's quite hard with the magazine to collate enough material together to bring one out. You know, we didn't want to bring it out every month and fill it with rubbish. We want to make sure we could bring enough stuff in there. But a podcast, there's so much you can talk about. It's more easier to find topics to talk about here, isn't it, than to fill a magazine. It
is. Well, as I think I've said before on previous shows, that I used to give you a call so we could discuss what we were going to do in the magazine. And essentially those conversations were the podcast shows. So, had we started recording our conversations 4 years ago, we would be up into the hundreds probably now in terms of how many podcast shows we've got.
Definitely, yeah. And we'd have covered so much. I mean, we've covered in 10 episodes, we've covered so much when you think about it. There's a lot we have covered, a lot we can still cover. So it's a lot of ground there. We've had people from TV, we had films on there, we've covered ghosts haunting, Enfield haunting, poltergeist, so many different things we covered. So
that's it.
Quite thorough. So
the reviews are rolling in nicely. We're up to 9 reviews now on iTunes, which is great, but it could be better. So as we're into double figures on the show, it would be really nice if someone could get us into double figures on the reviews. So all you need to do is head over to iTunes and just give us a review. Short review, few lines, tell us how good or, basically how good we are. You don't need to put anything negative. Thank you.
No, they will. Yeah, they will. You said this word too much, it'd be something like that.
But I do, I listen back to the shows and I'm aware that I say certain words too much. However, the last 2 or 3 shows, I've just been so tired when it comes around to recording the show. And that's when I have the brain fart moments when I'm trying to explain something and the words just don't come out. So I spend half the time actually editing out the silence that is put there by me in the first place. Yeah,
we're just humans though, we're not robots, and everybody has things they say all the time. You'll get someone like Frank Bruno will say "not a mean Harry" a lot, and he's known for that. So because it's part of what he says, and I'd rather hear someone speaking naturally than I've heard some podcasts that are very robotic and they talk like this and and that I find very dull. I'd rather just real human beings talking properly about stuff and being themselves.
I mean, I am aware, and I don't want anyone to point it out because I'm aware of it, that I do say we do say, you know what I mean, definitely. And I might stick a few likes in there now again. And it's so hard to, once you get into the throes of a good conversation, to take those elements out, because they're part of like natural conversation. I see, I've done it then. They're part of the natural conversation anyway. So if I spend my time trying to manage what comes out of my mouth, then it's going to take an element of natural fluidity away from the show, I think.
Definitely. I think that's what we need to keep it natural, I think, because it makes the show more interesting.
Natural.
Natural. If you're reading from a script, it becomes very dry, very dull. Do you know what I mean? It's just someone reading facts out. And if you want to just have facts read to you in a monotonous way, you can just look up a page on Wikipedia and read stuff off of there. But if you want people discussing things, having a bit of fun discussing it, and you've got to be yourself and natural, I feel. You
have, yeah. And, I've said it before about other podcasts as well. I listen to a hell of a lot of US-based podcasts, and there is so many, they use nuanced all the time and quote unquote. Everything's quote unquote all the time, which we haven't got around to sticking that into our podcast yet.
No.
Yeah.
The one thing I hate on a lot of US podcasts, and it's mainly women that do this, is when they talk and they go croaky at the end. And then today I go, and it goes like croaky. Do you know what I mean? When they talk and it's like emphasising the end of a sentence by going croaky.
I've never come across that.
It goes quieter and croaky.
Is that the smoking podcast you've been listening to?
Yes, it's usually with like Californian women. They sort of say, today we're going to talk about ghosts. It's like, it goes like a croaky sort of lower.
Ghosts.
And you notice it in every end of every sentence. And there was somebody talking, I think it's, when we did the Annabelle, Elisa Lam.
Elisa Lam.
Yeah, we covered that in one of the early shows. I watched a video. It was like I was on YouTube. And if you Google Elisa Lam, it's on there. But somebody talking about it goes, as you went to lift that money, and it's done like this croaky thing at the end of every single sentence. And it really got my nerves. It sounds like you got a sore throat. Why do you keep doing this croaky thing? But it seems to be like a modern thing. I've noticed a lot of people doing this, but that's one thing that irritates me. But I'm not going to talk in a croaky voice at the end. But they do that a lot. Strange.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things. It's we all have our own little things we do when we talk, and it's the same. If you were to write something, people would be have something to say about your style of writing. So it's just all part of being human, and me and Freddie are part human, so we have to abide to human rules sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah. But I feel that everyone has their own ways of doing things, and everyone has their own vocal expressions, and I think that's what makes people different. If we were all the same and spoke the same, it'd be very dull and very boring if everybody spoke in the same way. I think that's the way to do it.
It is. But we're feeling very generous as it's episode 10 at the Mystic Menagerie.
Yes.
And last month, we did give away a prize drawn at random from the people who left us a nice review on iTunes. And we're going to do exactly the same again this month. So we put all the names in the hat, all 9 of them, and we drew out Alan T2510. Okay, so you are our winning reviewer this month. So Alan T2510, you'll also win a copy of Malevolence, Click Click by Tom Burgess, and I'll tell you what, I'll throw in another Cuddly Cthulhu as well. So all you've got to do is drop us a line either via email or through the Facebook page, give us your address, and we'll send the bag of goodies out to you. And thanks for the review.
Thank you. Excellent. And keep those reviews coming in, because I know we've got more than 9 listeners. So if some of you can get us, put a little review on iTunes for us, we'd very much appreciate that.
Yeah, and Patreon's pretty good this month as well. More geared towards our magic audience. We have a 30-minute, not an interview, but a 30-minute recording of Prof BC from Doomsday. And it's at the end of one of his performances of the Everlasting Club. So he finishes his performance of the Everlasting Club, which is one of his book tests, and then he goes into a 30-minute conversation on the essence of bizarre performance. So you'll hear from the mastermind himself on how the best ways to market yourself, how to make yourself, how to put yourself across to your audience, and how to get the best out of your audience as well. And this is like coming from one of the most forward thinkers in bizarre at the current time, and has been for the last almost like the last decade. So in order to get hold of that special excerpt of the show, and also to get access to the previous Patreon-only subscription shows, all you need to do is head over to Patreon, look for the Mystic Menagerie, and if you join the Inner Sanctum, all you've got to do is pledge $15 and you will have access to all of the free material. And you're part of an elite special group. I think we've probably got about 26. We're heading up to 30 Patreon backers now, which is excellent. So
brilliant, yeah.
Only you and the remaining 30 people will have access to those shows. And it is really good material, and you're getting something which is well worth the money.
Yeah, and there's something you can't get anywhere else as well. They're quite unique things, you know. Some of them are like this month we're calling an event. Unless you were there, you know, you're not going to have heard that.
No.
So it's a chance to hear something that normally would have been slipped into the ether and just been experienced by the people that were there at that time. So we're trying to give something very special with the extra things, because we really appreciate people backing us on Patreon, and it's really appreciated that you're enabling us to carry on. That we want to give something special and something unique in return. So and if you go, even if you simply Google Mystic Menagerie Patreon, the page will come up. I think the first link on Google if you type that in. So thank you very much for the people that are sponsoring us again on Patreon, and we hope you enjoy this month's little special treat for you.
Yeah, and we're also $200 away from our first goal, and that will be mine and Freddie's tour of Bizarre London. So I know we've got a lot of overseas people there, but what we'll do for the overseas backers is probably do a video blog of it as well. So if you can't physically join us, we'll record it for you, and you can either listen to it and watch it as well. So we'll make sure you're part of the experience one way or another.
A virtual spooky tour of London, magical mystery tour around London spooky tour. So we'll have a virtual version of it. So we'll make sure that everyone can get involved. You know, everyone is a backer. We'll make sure that you are involved, and to some degree, or whether you can be there physically, or whether you can be there remotely or psychically, by video. But make sure that you'll get involved in it somehow.
Great. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back in a moment.
Toes.
Hello and welcome back to the Mystic Menagerie podcast, episode 10. So yes, double figures. So hurrah, little cake for us. If someone sent us a cake, please do. But we've reached 10 shows, so that's quite a big landmark for us. This segment's Our Bizarre Life, isn't it, Dan?
Yep, it is. And again, it's not been that long since the last show. There was a big gap between episode 8 and 9, but it's been relatively short between 9 and 10. But it has still been quite bizarre. It is my job at the end of the day, and I've been up to quite a few odd things. What about you, Freddie?
Yeah, the usual sort of weird stuff. One thing that's nice to speak. Remember Tom on the show a few episodes back?
Yes.
From the Spectral Times. There was an interview with myself in his wonderful magazine, the Spectral Times, in the latest issue, about my sort of psychic paranormal occult work. So I was quite pleased with that. It was a very lovely interview, and it's great to be in the magazine. It's a fine magazine. So, but I've been busy doing sort of unusual things, the usual stuff I do, reading seances. I do them every week, literally, every fortnight, actually.
You've got a trance workshop as well. Is that coming up soon? Or
yeah, I'm doing. I started on Thursday, actually. This Thursday, I'm
not
doing
trance as in the music.
No, no. No, this is more like people going into trances and relaxation exercises and that kind of thing, and connecting with spirits via trance. People into depth trances and remote viewing, that kind of stuff.
Like shamanic type stuff.
That kind of thing, yeah. That kind of thing. So getting
excellent.
Those sort of states, So that's going to doing that for 4 weeks, not 4 weeks solidly, but once a week for 4 weeks. So I've got that coming up as well. And I'm also going to be doing. We're arranging a date actually for another of one of my seance and paranormal nights, my occult experiences. That's going to be in August. So I'm going to do it in Datchet again, as we always do it there. There's 2 venues we use. We're going to use the hall this time. I think the bigger hall. So when I've got that sorted out, I'll probably say about it on the next show. So if anybody's in the locale and wants to come, where they can get tickets from.
I also hear that David Chaudoir has been our film director friend from a few shows back, has also been writing potentially stories involving you.
Yes, David, I don't know how much I can say, but he sent me a fantastic script where I'm a sort of like a sort of glam rock crime fighter, really. A paranormal investigator.
Like a Gary Glitter, but not Gary Glitter glam.
No. More Jason King. That'd be too extreme a film. I think that'd be banned straight away.
Yes.
But it's more kind of, I suppose, like sort of Jason King, Peter Wingard kind of style, where he's like a butler. So there's a little bit of a Batman setup, and there's a butler, a Polish butler, and I'm investigating sort of different paranormal events, sort of paranormal crimes and stuff like that. So it's almost like a Kung Fu X-Files and stuff like that. So it's going to be very good. And there's loads of ideas. And David sent me a script across, which is a story, which is fantastic. So I'm hoping that project can come to light. So, maybe we'll have a Indiegogo Kickstarter at some point.
Yeah, that'd be very interesting.
I'm going to see me in size 12 silver platform shoes and polyester jumpsuits fighting the undead. Yeah, but then you get your chance.
Yeah, it sounds like something I'd back anyway.
Yeah, I was definitely a project to back. I think it would be hilarious.
Great. So, anything else on the bizarre front, or is that?
That's pretty much what I've been up to, really. Other than doing the usual stuff, reading strange books and listening to strange music, and just doing strange things, and talking to budgies as well. So, it's been quite a wild time lately. It's just the usual things. Nothing sort of spectacular has happened. It's been business as usual, I suppose.
Good.
Which for most people is odd, but for me it's just normal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, mine was quite spectacular in the fact that I turned 40 a week and a half ago, which was quite bizarre in itself. I wasn't looking forward to it. The last night of being 39, I actually felt physically sick.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. Just the prospect of being 40. I'm not very good with the prospect of growing old, and I've got the old. Hold on a minute, my brain's fucking gone again. What's his name? Fucking Dorian Gray. Yeah. I've got the whole Dorian Gray thing going on. I'm not happy with the fact I'm growing old, and every year I look least forward to every birthday as it approaches. But I did, become 40 in style, and I spent the evening at Simon Drake's House of Magic, and had a wonderful time there. All very gothic and all very tongue-in-cheek. Had a great show. I had my head cut off, which was good, and had it stuck back on again. So I did lose my head that night, and it was good fun. So being 40, it's not so bad now. No.
It's the new 30, isn't it?
It is the new 30. Yeah. I'm always in pursuit of immortality. So anyone out there with any tips? I don't fancy really becoming a vampire. I'm not that good with blood anymore, ever since my forensics days. So if I could do it without drinking blood, any hints and tips would be great. But yeah, no blood for me, thanks.
No, and the other thing is, no matter how old you are, you've got to look at David Bowie and think, well, he's 68, so he ain't doing too bad. You know what I mean? People like that.
Yeah, it's not. No, you look at him and you think, my target is 85. That's what I want to get to. If I get to 85, I'll be a happy chap. And I try and stay active, hit the gym every day, all that type of stuff. Try and eat the right things. So, but yeah, growing old, it's just one of those. I think that's why things like vampires and just the quest for immortality they're so popular, because it is one element that we all share, and that is that we're all going to die, and we're all interested in trying to prolong our lives for as long as possible. So
definitely, I mean, you look at it, that's one of the things you think about. When you're younger, you think, all the time, do all the things I want, but when you get to a certain age, you start to think, how much time have I got left? I
think that's what it was that depressed me, because I've thought to myself, oh God, I could be halfway, but I thought about it logically, and I thought, well, I could have been halfway at 25. I could have been halfway at 21. I hope not, because that only leaves me 2 years, But you just never know when that halfway point is. So, and I did my MOT, my fitness MOT, and I came out with the fitness age of a 25-year-old. So really, I was only 26 last week. So, but might be a bit grey for a 26-year-old, but I can still outrun a few of these young whippersnappers out there.
Exactly, that's what matters, isn't it? I think that when you get older, I think it's like they become numbers. You do worry. If you don't worry about it, I don't really feel much different.
No.
Apart from I'm less agile than I was. Maybe I've been more than I have when I was younger. But I don't really feel that different. Not mentally, really. I just feel that, I still into the same thing, still like doing the same thing, still try to do the things I want to do, and don't really allow yourself to get older. So that's what I think. I think that's definitely a state of mind. It is.
And as long as you keep yourself active, and out of trouble, no unnecessary risks, I think you should be okay. Definitely, yeah. That's what I think about. I mean, and enjoying things. I think that's what I believe in, trying to get the most out of things. Not trying to do the things you don't want to do as less as you can. No. And so that was the birthday. So a bit depressing. Got the birthday out of the way. However, last week I did do an interview with BBC Wales for a new show called The Unexplainers. So any of our Welsh listeners may already know about this. But the Unexplainers is a show which has got two guys, John Rutledge and Mike Bubbins. John Rutledge, stand-up comedian, and Mike Bubbins, one of the members of Goldie Looking Chain. Do you remember that band, Freddie?
I do. I remember their great song, Your Mother's Got a Penis, is one of their songs, wasn't it?
Yeah, and Guns Don't Kill People, Rappers Do.
That's it, yeah. Very good.
Yeah, very good. And I did the strangest interview with them ever, because their shows, you can actually find them on iTunes. They do a podcast. It's called The Unexplainers. And it's also a BBC radio show. And if you go on the Facebook page, they've got their own page as well, and you can see the video version of the show. And it's very amusing, but it does cover good topics in the paranormal and the unexplained. So they've already done ABCs, so Alien, Big Cats. The last one was UFOs, and of course the next one they're going to do is fairies. Excellent. So my friend Fiona, the author of The Last Changeling, took them up some hill in Wales looking for fairies. And so then they called me, obviously being the perpetrator of the mummified fairy hoax. And they do it from a perspective that John is the cynic, the skeptical one, trying to disprove everything. And Mike is the all-believing person who, believes absolutely everything. So during this interview, I was trying to make out that it was all real from one perspective, but then being questioned by John, I was then telling him that it was all a hoax. But it was a very strange, it's the strangest interview I've ever done, and it took a few takes. But it's going to sound really good, and hopefully your next show we should have a copy of the interview and can actually put that in amongst the podcast for you all to listen to.
Superb, yeah. Fantastic. Excellent.
So that did that, and weekend just gone, I did my little bit of urban exploration again. Yes. I went off into Cannock Woods. I think I already mentioned it on the last show. The Cannock Chase up in I think it's Staffordshire, I believe. I'm not quite sure. It's sort of near Rugeley and Tamworth, and obviously Cannock, and it's a hot spot for all types of paranormal activity. You name it, they've got it in those woods. They've got Bigfoot, they've got giant snakes, pig-headed men, black-eyed kids, UFOs, ghosts, all sorts of strange stuff, and it all happens in those woods. And I've never been there before. And me and my son sort of did a bit of fence jumping and went to check out some ruins. We'll probably cover it more during the next show. But I was really surprised at how dense the woods are there.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it was tipping it down with rain, although it was quite humid, and just climbing through thick, almost mile after mile of like rhododendron bushes and trees that have been planted literally sort of 30 centimetres apart. It was dense. I mean, the last time I was in woodland that dense, I was actually in the Amazon rainforest when I was 17 and a half in the Navy, hacking my way through jungle. And in all the time we were in there, we never saw a single person.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, the weather was bad, However, we walked for miles. We was on paths as well at some point, but we just didn't see anybody at all. We heard a few snaps of twigs in the trees behind us, which got my son a little bit twitchy. But we sort of stopped and watched, and it was actually a deer that was walking along in amongst the woodland. So the non-skeptical person might have thought it was a Sasquatch sneaking up on them, but it definitely was a deer. I saw it sort of his little tufty tail.
Yeah.
So that was the only thing we actually saw. But the woods are genuinely claustrophobic and overbearing. So we're going to go back in autumn, and we're going to set a trail cam up in one of the most active areas. So we're going to stick a trail cam, and then we're going to go back the next day and retrieve the camera and see if we capture anything other than animals on film. But it's an amazing area. We stopped in Tamworth, which I've never stopped at before, and we used that as our base. So we had all of our equipment there, cameras and bits and bobs. Anyone who's my friend on Facebook will see some of the photographs I took. And in fact, what I'll do is, straight after this podcast, I'll go and put them on the Mystic Menagerie page. But we came across a very strange stone circle. It was almost like a summoning ring in the woods. It was surrounded by like a walled garden. And we managed to sort of scale this sort of 25-foot wall and get inside. And it is something straight out of Pan's Labyrinth. I
saw the picture of that, actually. Yeah, it's very creepy.
It is.
Is there much history attached to the woods there? Is there much anything weird happened there in the past, anything documented that?
Yeah, there's a certain child killer used to dump bodies of children in the woods there. That's just been there for so long. They're steeped in history. I think if anyone just goes online and types in Cannock Chase or Paranormal Cannock, there is almost everything from every area of paranormal investigation there.
Fantastic.
Yeah, this is what I was. We'll talk about it later on in the show with Paul regarding Spring Hill Jack. But there's most of the creatures that you see there have the red glowing eyes, which has always been a kind of mystery to me. So there are Neanderthal type cavemen supposedly seen in the woods who have these glowing red eyes. Giant snakes, really sort of creatures, big cats as well, alien big cats, ABCs. So you've got pumas wandering the woods, werewolves. There's even werewolves
as well.
Werewolves as well. There is everything. I'm not sure as if there's a vampire. There's a monkey man, a monkey man, pig-headed man. Obviously, it's in amongst all these mining towns, and I've got no doubt that some people obviously go into the woods to because it's a safe place to sort of explore their drug habits, quite possibly. However, a lot of the documented sightings, especially Nick Redfern, who's a very good author who's from that area, I think he only lived a few miles away from Cannock, he's written a lot of books on the happenings in Cannock Woods, and it's a place I'm going to keep going back to because there's a lot of information and stories in there that I believe have yet to be uncovered.
Fantastic! It sounds like the place to be, for that, like your one-stop shop for paranormal activity.
Exactly. They've been doing research on the place called Castle Ring, which is a huge. They believe it was a fortification at some point dating from 2,500 years ago. A Celtic tribe used to live there who worshipped the horned god. They were part of the cult of the horned god. And the paranormal researchers believe that there's actually almost like a psychic fault in the ground where that is. And that itself is almost like a point on the earth where all of these things actually spawn from, almost like maybe like some sort of portal where these creatures actually come from.
Strange.
It is. So we walked the whole of Castle Ring. We walked around it twice. It's a lot bigger than you actually think. It's huge. You can go and look for it on Google Earth. Type in Castle Ring Cannock and you'll see it. It's almost like a Stonehenge without the henge.
Wow.
So yeah, you walk it and you can walk across the base of it. It's almost like a mini volcanic crater where the Celtic fortress would have once stood.
Fantastic. Any ancient woodland like that, it's got some history. There's always a creepy feel to it, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
there's always something that's happened there. And also the other thing is you get a feeling that something's happened there when you go to these places that are that old.
Yeah. I'll definitely be reporting back with whatever else I can find to do with Cannock. I've actually started, now I'm 40, I've started writing my book. So I'm writing a book on the whole Derbyshire mummified fairy story and all the little things that happened, years afterwards. Brilliant. And one of my reasons for going there is actually some part of the story actually takes me to Cannock. So I've had to go there purely to investigate some things there. But obviously I don't want to give too much away in the book, and it's early days, so it's hard work writing a book.
It is. And it's sometimes you rewrite things you're not happy with, or you read back and you think, no, I'm not happy with that, or you just, and getting them the right information as well sometimes, or leaving bits out and remembering things. Obviously, if you're writing something that's factual from your memory, it can be quite a drain sometimes, And sometimes you wonder if you remember things factually correct, if it was something years ago, because I've written a couple of books I haven't finished about things that happened to me a long time ago, but some things seem distorted, or you can't remember the details, so it's kind of racking your brains and filling in those gaps sometimes.
It's great, but these memories do come back, though. It's one thing I found. It was almost like if you're pulling a thread on an old jumper, you keep pulling and more things come out that you actually forgot about.
Yeah, it does eventually.
Yeah, I mean, in the book I cover obviously my artistic influences, and I remember the first time I actually drew something that got me dragged to the head teacher's office by the religious education teacher, because she was so disturbed by what she saw. But we were, as you do at school, you cover the Holocaust and World War II, and we had to illustrate. We're learning about Belsen and the discovery of the concentration camps, and we had to illustrate the essay. So most people were drawing things like a train going into a camp, or something. But what I drew, I actually drew lines of Jews essentially queuing up to go into the gas chamber, and there was Nazis with Rottweilers and Alsatians, and they were like biting the people, and it was all very dark and ominous, and the actual gas chambers themselves had smoke billowing out of the chimneys, and the tortured faces of the people who were inside the chambers were actually sort of drawn into the smoke billowing out. And I thought it was really, I was just expressing what I thought, their pain essentially. And the teacher went absolutely banzai, and she grabbed me and took me down to the head teacher's office, and she was like, "This is sick," and all this. And I just didn't know what the issue was. She'd asked me to draw it, and I drew it. And the head mistress, she wasn't even an art teacher. She was a PE teacher. She was very butch. She looked like a member of the communards. She had really cropped hair and like dungaree type wearing lady. Yeah. She looked at the picture, and then she said to the teacher, "Well, what did you ask him to draw?" And she said, "Well, I asked him to illustrate his essay on the concentration camps." And she looked at it and she went, "I really like this picture. It says everything to me about the pain, the suffering, and everything, all summed up in like a pencil drawing at the bottom of the page." And she told the teacher to get over herself and sent me back to the classroom.
Excellent.
So it was like a big fuck you to the teacher, and the head mistress really liked it. And, I said, well, that is exactly what I was trying to convey when the teacher asked me to draw it.
Exactly. People teach you something like that, as horrific as Holocaust, and if you're artistically minded, they say, I want you to document that, or you're going to go by how you imagine it to be like there, the worst side of it, you want to express that horror. So it's natural.
So they show you a whole documentary on the Holocaust and then ask you to draw a picture of a train or, a pair of shoes or pile of shoes or something. You're not going to draw that. You're going to draw the thing that sticks in the mind you most. And that is all the death and mindless destruction that happened. And that's exactly what I drew. But that was my first defining piece of disturbing artwork, I think, that definitely grabbed some attention and made me stand out a bit in the school as a bit of a dark horse when it came to artwork. But had I not started writing the book, I don't think I'd have remembered that, to be honest. So, these skeletons in cupboards come out.
Yeah, triggers these memories and all that, because it all connects together. I think it's all in your mind somewhere, but it's whether you can access that. It's a bit tricky to use in Google sometimes, because you can search and it doesn't come up, and suddenly you get the results a few days later, or a few hours later. So there's all sorts of stuff that we may have put into the mist of time, but it's all there.
It is, yeah. So that's pretty much it for my bizarre life. So pretty hectic for saying it's only been a few weeks. So I'm gonna plod on and see what happens with the book, and obviously with Cannock Chase, and hopefully next show we'll have the radio interview for people.
Excellent, fantastic.
What we got coming up next is, if we remember from Doomsday that we discussed in the last episode, Lothar Malmberg from Canada actually stayed at Castle von Baines for a few days. So I had the opportunity to sit him down and have a nice interview with him. And so after the break, we're going to come back with an interview with Lothar. And anyone from the bizarre magic and mystery entertainment world will find this interview very interesting indeed, because his beliefs are very different to your mainstream beliefs that you would find in our field. So he is a man of faith, whereas I would have thought most people who work in our line of entertainment generally don't have any faith at all. Would you agree with that, Freddie? Or a faith that's non-mainstream, should I say?
Yeah, or they lean more towards a sort of esoteric kind of, non-traditional faith, So yeah, for someone who has strong beliefs like that, to actually go into something which would be frowned upon within that community, it's interesting to hear his angle on this. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's when I first met him, we were walking through the streets of Whitby, and I was explaining to him how my fairy book from Carlton Books got axed because the American market thought it was too pagan. So there was me kind of harping on about, bloody Christians and all that, ruining my writing career. And little did I know he was actually a born-again Christian himself. So it was great, though, that he stopped with me, because we come from opposite ends of the spectrum. It was almost like yin and yang. So I took him for a walk around, London, took him around all the bizarre sites, and every sort of conversation we had we knew it was coming from completely different angles. So it was very interesting. And he's also I've also given him some space on the Lebanon Circle website now, because he's started dabbling in production of effects and props. So if you go over to the Lebanon Circle website and look under Lothar Malmberg, you'll see one of his new effects called the Memory Box, which is available now. And he also demoed a few new effects to me as well, which were very impressive. But they do come from a more biblical kind of background. However, you can still perform them and not come across as being religious. So they do discuss the dark side as well as the light side. So it's a very balanced performance, and written by a man who I think is very unique in the world of mystery entertainment at the moment.
Definitely. Another thing that we have to mention about Lothar, he's got a fantastic beard.
It is epic.
It's a wonderful beard. It's like ZZ Top. It's a very wonderful, it's an amazing beard. And it adds to the image, I think. It adds to the whole reputation, the image of a performer. Yeah. He looks like a wizard. Yeah, he's like a cross between a wizard and a Viking warrior, because he's got like plaits in it as well. My children thought Santa Claus had come early to the house. So they thought he was great. They loved him. But yeah, they did think he was very Santa Claus-like. Yeah, he is, isn't he? I think he gets a lot of work around the Sandbosch, I think, anyway. So, but yeah, Lothar is a bit of a unique character, and
he is, and great to have him on board the Lebanon Circle team, and great to have this hour-long interview with him, which I'm sure you're all going to find, even if you're not from the mystery entertainment world. He's a ghost walker as well, so he does ghost walks in Drumheller in Alberta. So it'll be very interesting. You'll love it, and we'll take a short break, and we'll come back with the interview with Lothar Malmberg. I'm sat here with a very familiar face from this year's Doomsday up in Whitby, and I'm sat here with Lothar Malmberg, who travelled over from Canada to perform his seance entitled Echoes, which was received very well at Doomsday, and he's agreed to do an interview for us for the Mystic Menagerie podcast. So hi Lothar, how are you?
I'm doing really well, thanks.
Good, enjoying your trip?
Very much, it's fascinating.
Good, you've had a good... It's almost a bit like a semi-world tour, but only around Europe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I didn't see everything I wanted to see, but I saw a lot.
Good. Yeah. And you enjoyed Whitby and the sights that there?
Oh, I loved Whitby. I could have spent another 2 days there. Yeah. Easy.
Good. Yeah. Well, it was great to see you there.
Thanks.
And it's one of those things, your name appears quite a lot on the internet and in the bizarre community. but I think due to obviously your location, 'cause you do live sort of quite remotely.
Could say that.
Yeah, I mean, some people have not even seen you, let alone actually met you. So you were a bit of an enigma when you came to Whitby. Everyone was like, "Who's Lothar?" And
that's cool.
I heard things about you, and I heard you've done great things, and you're a great performer and storyteller, and you also do ghost walks.
Yeah.
I thought you're the perfect person to have at Doomsday, and so we encourage and embrace people who travel, to Whitby and show us new things. So it was great to have you there. But with the nature of Doomsday, and as it is, it's very busy. Yeah. There's lots of people all wanting to talk to everyone else all of the time.
That's right.
I was never able to pin you down at any point and have a proper chat with you. So here's our opportunity my opportunity to interrogate you for our listeners, and hopefully, for you to, blow your own trumpet and big yourself up a bit.
All right.
Get the word out there.
Fair enough.
So where did it? Good question for anyone who's involved in bizarre magic. Yeah. Where did it all begin?
Oh my gosh. I started just with regular magic. I've been a performer for, this is now 40. This year marks 41 years of performing. And it ran in my family. My father was a performer and my great-grandfather was a performer. So that's where it started. And about 15 or 20 years ago, I grew up in the church, and I've always taken my faith fairly seriously. But about 25, 30 years ago, I started to really question what it is, why I believe it, that kind of thing. And started to prod those areas. And in that, or along with that, it became, with my magic, I became not dissatisfied with the magic, because I love performing, whether it's a birthday party or a Christmas show. But I got tired with just doing a show. I wanted to do something that had more meat, more meaning. And ultimately, I wanted to be able, if I could, to tie that meat and meaning in with what it is that I believe, some of my ideas, without evangelizing or proselytizing. I just wanted to open up a door for communication with other people and broaden their worldview maybe a little bit. So I started looking at this whole idea of, it wasn't so much bizarre magic that started it, but more directly to the idea of a seance. Okay. And a seance, and that was a 10-year journey, just in that, from the beginning to actually putting the show together, because the word seance and all that goes with it is a contradiction, a very strong contradiction to the Christian faith. Very strong, because of its history. Yeah. Right? But I knew that there was some value there as far as similar themes and ideas. So I really started to explore, could I, as a Christian, could I do a seance? And if so, what would that look like? And ultimately, then I had to go on that 10-year journey, because I had to be able to eventually defend my position to those who were in faith. How can you be a man of faith and do a seance? Yeah. So I had to answer those questions rationally and intelligently before I could actually put the show together.
Yes. I mean, we've discussed this before, and I assumed when I first met you, I think you assume with most people in the bizarre magic field that they're not men of faith, right? Because most people aren't. Right. There are, I do know some people in the UK who are, would term religious, or as you call yourself, a man of faith, which is a different, as you said yourself, it's a slightly different outlook, isn't it? I suppose
it's a matter of definition. For me, it's
But it's definitely a brave thing getting people on board who are of the same belief system as you into something which is, as a whole, you would consider it to be like an outcast subject. It'd be, well, we're not touching that because of its perceived, I suppose, occult roots.
Yeah, exactly.
So, how up to now, how has that reception been?
For those that are not in the church, or those that are nominal in faith, they love what I do.
Yeah.
For those who know me, they like the performance art that I do, but they don't want to see me do it anymore. They won't come. If I'm doing a seance or a bizarre show, they won't come. If I'm doing a magic show, they'll be there.
Okay.
Because they do like me and they like the magic that I do. But for those that are in the church that know me, again, if it's the bizarre area or the seance, unless I really specifically ask them to come because I want some input from them, they won't come.
No.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm good with that. It means I'm doing my job.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely a difficult subject to broach.
It is.
I would have thought.
Yeah.
I mean, I know when I told you myself when the local vicar came around here when we had our sons christened.
Right.
My wife, who is the one who has faith, wasn't here because she's at work. So as usual, I was left to be the guy who spoke to the vicar for what was going to be 45 minutes, ended up being 2 hours of him being very interested in all of these things I had lying around. What does that do? Oh, that's a machine to communicate with the dead. What? How does it work?
Yeah.
And I had the same reaction as what you did. Although it wasn't, I don't want to see that anymore. It was a case of once he'd got over the initial concept and then realised it was more theatrical, a theatrical appliance,
right?
But with 1 foot in reality and 1 foot in fantasy, he could see some light in it, I suppose.
Sure, that's
he could see more light than dark.
Yeah.
However, he also was concerned that it could lead people with no faith down the wrong path.
Yes.
And I suppose that's the same thing, the same problem as the people who you have done your performance to see it.
That's right.
So I can cope with it because I still got my faith at the end of it all.
Yeah.
However, for those who haven't got the faith, then it might be this could be their path in the wrong direction.
It could be, and I have to live with that. I have to deal with that in my own. I still struggle with that because yes, that is a very real possibility. And yes, maybe in my theology, I may have to answer for that somewhere down the road. But in the bigger picture, at least for where I am right now in my journey, on the bigger picture, I'd rather have that discussion now and get people thinking in a bigger context that maybe there is something more out there than just the here and now. And that it's positive, that there is a positive something bigger out there. It doesn't have to be a negative. So I would rather have that conversation, or at least open those doors for exploration, than to just run away in fear.
Yeah, it's because at the end of the day, the faith supports the theory of life after death.
Yeah, very much.
However, the idea of making contact with life after death through a non-religious medium is a thing that most people find a bit unnatural.
That's right. That's the big one.
So how your ghost walks that you do?
Yeah.
Obviously, you're walking around Drumheller, isn't it?
Yes.
The town. So you're walking around, and obviously you'll see people from your congregation, I suppose, around while you're doing it. So how do they take the whole ghost walk thing as well? Is that paint? Do they look at that in the same light?
Not at all.
Hold it at arm's length?
No, that's a whole different ball game because the walk itself. The great thing about the term ghost walk is it doesn't have to be about ghosts. It could just be about history
and legends.
That's right.
Yeah.
And predominantly, my tour is the history of the town. Drumheller has some really rich history, tightly tied to the UK. It was men from the UK, first generation, that came over and started our town. So there's some really rich history there. And our town, if you believe the stories of the people that live there, the town is highly haunted, actively. Every day something new happens. So that's interesting. And what I do is, during the Ghost Walk tour, it's mostly history, but there's about half a dozen ghost stories tied with some of the buildings as we walk, and I retell those stories. None of them are bad, none of them are scary. They're all very positive. A couple of them are more active than the others, but it fits in with the tour because it's just a story. And so those that know me, that are in the church and in the community, some of them have come on the tour because they've just found it historically a big eye-opener for them.
Yeah.
They've lived in the town all their lives and they didn't know half the stuff that I told them, so it was great.
Yeah. So our readers always want to, they love ghost stories. So in terms of Drumheller, in terms of activity and the eeriest story, what would you consider that to be? The one that, when you do the walk, makes people think, makes them look over their shoulders as you're telling it, essentially.
It's probably, the eeriest one would be right at the end of the tour, because it's the heaviest, it's the saddest. Almost every time I tell a story, I myself have to take a moment to get myself together because I cry.
Okay.
It's just all about the Spanish influenza at the end of World War II. Hundreds of people died. It's a school, no longer. It's a school, though, that we stop in front of, the old school that was a hospital for that event. And through the last 60 years, lots of stories in that school of activity. Children, songs, orbs, just endless stories.
Yeah.
Because there was so much sadness at that place. And people get, they get a little wigged out. They get a little uncomfortable. They start looking at the school and the windows, expecting to see a face.
Yeah.
And then we walk another block and end up finishing at a building that was the morgue temporarily for that Spanish flu. And so they start getting this. Some of them, I ask them, you want to come in and have a look around? They go, no, thank you very much. This is fine. So it's that's probably the weirdest, in terms of the Ghost Walk, that's the weirdest event.
Yeah, so it ends on quite a solemn note then, so they're left...
yes.
Most Ghost Walks rarely end on a happy high note, do they? Because essentially they're all about horrific events. It's, well, I would say UK ones generally are.
Okay.
Always some, you've always got the typical, the jilted bride,
right.
the abused servant, the child locked in the attic.
Right.
these sort of template ghost stories that you get in the UK, and
right.
You do get the odd happy one. So, is there, obviously Drumheller's location, is there something that you would consider the major draw to all this sort of activity that is there? I mean, I know it's got a history, but
it's just the history of the town. Was a coal mining town. It was built on coal mining. That's why it's there, because of all the coal. And with that lifestyle, especially in those first 30 years, safety was not an issue. All those regulations weren't there. Houses, everything was built quickly.
Yeah.
So you had a lot of mine accidents, cave-ins, the houses, everything was heated by oil and coal.
Yeah.
So you had a lot of hotel and house fires just because of that. Creosote everywhere. So there's just a lot of tragic death that happened in our valley in the last 100 years. And that is a big attributes largely to the activity.
Yeah.
A lot of the families, descendants of those families still live in the valley. A lot of the buildings are still there. So, it's for me, there's a lot of echoes that remain behind. They're not trapped, but they're attached.
Hence the name of your seance.
That's right. Echoes, yeah. Echoes Spirit Theater. So that's why there's so much activity there. And again, like you say, we don't have, the stories that we have aren't stories of, they're not bad stories.
No.
They're not a Jack the Ripper story.
No.
They're not a mass murder story. It's just stories of great sadness and tragedy.
Yeah.
And that makes it easier to tell, because that's a common theme for everybody. We all feel that in some way or another.
Yeah.
Right? Who hasn't lost a pet, a favorite aunt or an uncle, right? So these are very universal stories that really touch people.
No, it's. I mean, it's got you say 7,000 population.
About that, yeah.
Yeah, so it's relatively small. So the ghost walks that you do, is there a high sort of transit of tourists through the area? Is it a
huge?
Yeah.
We have the Royal Tyrrell Museum of Paleontology there.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if it's the biggest North American museum of dinosaur displays, but it certainly is very close to it. And we sit in southern Alberta there, we sit on a huge repository of dinosaur bones. So the museum gets upwards of 600,000 tourists in a summer.
Wow, okay.
So there's a lot of people that come through Drumheller specifically for that.
Yeah.
But there's some very interesting geography through our valley that's really worth looking at while you're there too. So
these on an average ghost walk then, I mean, I know you said something like it's the nature of the beast, isn't it, with the ghost walk, usually weather dependent and time of the year.
Yeah. So
what would be your typical kind of audience? What would you take around on a good night?
On a good night, I'm looking at maybe a dozen, 14, 15 people. On an average night, 5 or 6.
Yeah.
So, and that's okay. Some nights nobody shows up. And again, it's either the weather's a little, they're not sure, or there's other things going on. And like that is the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
But this is coming into the 5th year now, and it's been growing a little bit every year. My Facebook page for the Ghost Walk Tour, I've been monitoring it specifically since Christmas. And I have had the most interest and views on that page than I've had in the last 4 years. It's huge. It's just exploded. So I'm really optimistic about this year.
Yeah, it's good that, I think we discussed this before, there seems to be another surge in the interest in the paranormal and, and bizarre magic, essentially.
I think so.
Yeah.
And TV certainly hasn't hurt that.
No, definitely not. You can kind of look at what's out at the moment, and if you're part of the general flock of what we like to call normal people, I wouldn't say neither you or myself would consider ourselves normal, but what they like is generally imprinted by what's current in the media at the time.
Right.
So at the moment, for example, you've got Poltergeist, and then the re-release, and previous to that in the UK we had the Enfield Poltergeist. So there's a lot of interest at all of us in Poltergeist.
That's right.
For some weird reason, and it paints itself onto the general public. So I've no doubt that in the UK as well at the moment, Ghost Walk's doing quite well. But obviously I don't know what's happening in Canada at the moment. But it's interesting how that sometimes dictates the nature of the business. Something we generally don't have control over.
That's right.
But it's I think as a bizarre performer, you have got the ideal job as well, because being part of mystery entertainment is the ability to tell a good story.
Right.
So you essentially do that, 2 or 3 times, and is it how many nights a week would you?
Twice a week. Yeah.
So you're retelling these stories all the time, and that's one thing I definitely remember from your performance of Echoes at Doomsday, is your ability to engage with the audience, draw them in, and tell a good story. And that is essentially what it's all about. If you haven't got that skill, I would suggest that that the people shouldn't do the job.
Exactly. And I've been told that a few times, that people have told me that they find me a really good storyteller.
Yeah.
And it's really one of those things. I've seen a couple of videos in the last year of me doing some bizarre effects. Well, and I have a video of me doing the Ghost Walk, part of the Ghost Walk tour. And, I can't watch them because I just find my voice irritating and boring. It's unentertaining for me.
Tell me about it. I have to edit my own shows.
Yeah. Oh,
it's the worst thing ever. I'm like, geez, does anyone really listen to this?
I know.
People then say, actually, it's quite good. And I'm like, okay, it must be all right. But
yeah.
It must be like watching yourself on TV if you're an actor. A lot of actors never watch their own films.
I guess, right?
They go to the premiere and then go to the bar as soon as they walk up the red carpet. And I say, I'll see you in 2 hours.
It's funny that way. So obviously I have something working for me, and I'll continue to flog that as long as I can. Yeah. You bet.
Have you got like a regular venue that you use then? For your spirit, your seance show?
Last year we started putting it into at the end of our valley, on the far end of the valley, is a great tourist stop called the Last Chance Saloon, built in 1912. It's a hotel and a bar.
Yeah.
And there's nothing. It's in a ghost town now. There's nothing there in the town of Wayne except a couple of houses, but this bar is still there, and it is haunted, actively haunted too. Everybody the world over knows about this place, so anybody who visits Drumheller makes that a stopping point. Okay. So last year I talked with the new owners of the place, and they were quite interested in bringing the seance into their bar as a further tourist draw. And so that was the first year. The summer went reasonably well. We managed to pull, I think, half a dozen shows. And we had 20, we maxed out at about 30 people.
Okay.
Right. And they liked it enough that they are willing to try it again this summer. Mm. So I'll find out when I get back. We'll see how ticket sales are going, and see how it goes. So I'm really pleased, because it's it's a difficult venue.
Yeah.
Because just of the way the layout is. But it's a challenge, and that makes it exciting and interesting as well.
Yeah. I mean, for everyone who never saw you at Doomsday, can you sort of tell our listeners what the concept of echoes is?
Oh, sure.
Like sort of in your introduction, because it's a really interesting concept that it's like analogies that I've heard used before, but you seem to have put it and summed it up better than any other way I've heard it.
And unlike a typical seance where you come around, sit at the table, and try to contact Grandma Dorothy, this is not like that. Instead, I had a great granduncle who came to Canada at the turn of the 1800s, and I found this out while I was researching my family tree a few years back, and he eventually settled down in eastern Canada, raised a family. And now there's 2 sets of cousins that I've discovered there. One of this particular uncle or cousin in his lifetime had 13 children and outlived 10 of them.
Wow.
So I took that little bit of that premise, and I wanted to tell his story. But I also wanted to tell a story about what it was like to be a coal miner in Drumheller in the day. Mm. And give people a sense of the loss, the difficulty of the lifestyle. So I took my great cousin's life, and I took the life of the coal miners, and I brought them together. And what I do is I tell stories. I have a little table I sit at, and I tell stories. I introduce him, his wife, his daughter, their connection, the tragedy that happened within them. And then I tell stories about coal mining life. And I invite people 1s and 2s at a time to sit with me at my table. I'll borrow personal items from them.
Yeah.
And strange and unusual things will happen with those items, attributed to either the echoes of the coal miners or to my great uncle and his daughter who died very young. So that's the premise of it, and it makes it a very theatrical storytelling presentation.
Yeah. Yes. This is probably if I was a Christian, and even though I wouldn't see that personally as a seance, I mean, it is a seance, but not in your typical sense, is it? So,
that's right.
Would I be expected to turn up and, do glass moving or spelling things out, contacting the spirits that way? So, in that sense, it's a different approach to a seance, which is what you've said, essentially, which I find difficult to understand how they would find that unusual because essentially you're telling a very good story, which is true.
Yeah.
And involving magic, essentially, with and their perception. But I just find it odd that it's viewed as still being slightly a no-go zone, even when it's essentially a story with a trick, which is that's what we do.
Well, that's right. It's a whole. It's hard to explain if you've never been there.
Yeah.
If you're not in faith or ever, if you haven't been brought up in the church, that doesn't work. If you've never had even a bit of a serious faith and then lost it, it's hard to understand what goes on within a person.
Yeah.
I do have some friends in the church that I've had for many years that will come and see the show because they understand that I'm a performer, I'm a magician, and I'm telling a theatrical story, and weird crap's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that is of interest to them, right?
Yeah.
And so they will come, and I appreciate that. There are some people, though, that won't come. Mostly it's because of the scenario, right? Although I'm not contacting ghosts or spirits, I'm attributing to some extent the activities at my table to them. Although I never directly say that, still it's got that concept, right? And there are some people within the church, just within my own congregation, that have had dealings with, they say they've had dealings with spirits and having to remove spirits from locations and people and stuff. And that may well be. But because of it, they have this great fear around the topic.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons, too, why I started the Ghost Walk. I started the Ghost Walk to promote my seance. It's all business.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Right? Very much so. But I also started the Ghost Walk where I started to look into the idea of ghosts, what they are, why they are, and try to look at them from the perspective of the church. Because the one thing we don't talk about in the evangelical church is ghosts and spirits. Although we believe in them, sort of, we don't talk about them.
The Holy Ghost, it's a spirit.
Yeah, but when you die, you go to another place. You're not here anymore.
You're not able to come back and have a chat.
That's right.
Yeah.
So once you're dead, you're gone. And the concept that maybe something still hanging around that was part of you it's not foreign, but it's, I guess, scary because it immediately becomes labeled as unnatural, so it's demonic, so it's evil.
Yeah.
So the church, we don't talk about that. So I started doing. I'm still on my journey, but I'm beginning to do research and try to understand from a perspective of Christianity what are ghosts and spirits, and so that it gives somebody within the. I want to be the go-to person within the church, where people can go and talk about something weird's going on in my life here, and they don't want to be labeled as demonic or possessed or weird. But they need a place to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that maybe I can have some rational and reasonable answers to give them where they can't find anywhere else.
No.
We'll see.
Yeah. So what have you, in taking that into account then, what would you consider a ghost to be? Or, yeah. What is it?
Well, there's two held positions within the church. We are a physical being. One is that we're a physical being, we have a spirit, and we have an eternal soul. The other side of that camp is that we're a physical being and we have an eternal soul.
Yeah.
So one's dichotomy, one's a trichotomy, if you will.
Yeah.
And I'm of the camp that we're made up of three parts. With that, and also with the belief system that we don't live in a perfect world. We should. We were supposed to, but we don't. Things are not. We know that in our own lives. So for me, it's possible that when you die, your spirit and your soul can get separated.
Yeah.
And the soul goes on to wherever it goes on for eternity, but the spirit, that which gives you your will, your personality, somehow that can get left behind.
Like an imprint, almost, on the environment, maybe?
There is that. That's part of it. Well, that's one way that it can express itself.
Yeah.
I don't always believe that the spirit left behind is conscious.
No.
I think that it can be, but it's rare.
Yeah.
For me. My understanding at this point, my idea is that most of the time it's just trapped and it's just going through its routine, or it's like an echo. It's locked into a thing of space, and with the right trigger, it expresses itself and then it goes back. And that's for some people that's kind of lame.
It actually makes a lot of sense to me. It's along the similar lines as to what I would essentially believe. Because even though I don't perform, but I develop props and write routines based around seance, I've never actually believed that I'm making anyone's ever making direct contact with a spirit who is entirely can communicate in every way. Because like you, I believe that if there is that element, it's actually moved on and gone somewhere else, and what's left behind is, as you say, the echo or a stamp on the environment that comes and goes depending on whoever knows what those particular factors are. Right. It could be the time of year. You've had the pleasure of stopping in the Tower of Doom upstairs. Right. At my house, where every Christmas we somehow have an influx of children running around upstairs. Right. When we don't have children, we've got children downstairs, real ones. Yeah. But upstairs we can still hear children playing, and it's very real. We hear them squealing, running around. And it's always at a particular time of year. But do I believe that is the actual souls of the children running around upstairs? No. It's almost like a recording that is played, which is triggered by a certain emotion or an environment or a time of year. Because yourself from ghost walks, people are almost, if they've seen a ghost, they've seen a replay of something. Yeah, it seems like as an outsider.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that the only thing that doesn't account for is EVPs, and
it kind of does in a way though, because it's an audible sort of representation as opposed to a visual one, isn't it?
As long as it's not responding to a question.
True. Yeah.
Right. There's always an anomaly somewhere. So for me right now, the whole idea of ghosts, oftentimes they fit into boxes reasonably neatly. But even with boxes, there's always an anomaly.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to make sense of some of those anomalies. If I don't, I don't. And I don't have to make sense of them. I'm not on a crusade that I have to make sense of this, that, and the other thing. No. I love the mystery.
Yeah.
Life is a mystery. The great, death is a mystery. So I don't have to make sense of those things. To me, that's not important. What is important, though, is the journey to try and make some sense of those things. Unlike, I know quite a few ghost hunters, if you will, guys in paranormal associations, and they're always out to explore the next haunting.
Yeah.
Right? They want the next EVP, the next photograph. And it's all about the sense, even in their own lives, seems to be about the sensationalism of, I got to get that recorded. I want to experience this. I don't. I'm not sensitive to things paranormal.
You've never seen anything yourself?
Not that I know of.
Not you know of, no.
I've had 2 experiences that I'm unsure of. So they could have been paranormal. But other than that, being surrounded by it every day down in Drumheller, I've never had an experience that I know of.
No.
I'm just not sensitive that way. I don't want the experience.
No.
I really don't. I mean, yes, it would be interesting. I would, sure. I actually, part of me would like to see a ghost, but I'd like to have a conversation. I don't want to just see a ghost come and go.
No, you want to interact in some way.
Yeah. So I'm not out for the thrill, the excitement, the experience. I'm looking, because I'm looking at this from the eyes of the church, I'm looking to find some reason, some answer, some rationale to give people some peace. So if there's a person, especially in the church, it's not isolated to them, but that's where my focus is. If they come to me and say, you know, I've heard this little girl crying and it's really bothering me, and I want to know, you know, is that a demon? Is that, you know, Satan out there trying to? I want to be able to give them some real, rational answer to put away the fear. Yeah. Right. The reason we're afraid of ghosts is, the reason we're afraid of anything usually is our ignorance. With knowledge comes rationale and peace. Yeah. And so the more we understand perhaps what ghosts are, the less afraid might be our we won't react initially perhaps with fear. Right. That being said, if I see a ghost, I'm sure my first response is going to be flight.
It probably won't be.
I don't know.
It will be from what I've spoken to people in the past about sightings of anything, right, it always comes when you're not expecting it. So the ghost hunters really don't. They go hunting, right, and then I think it's because they're looking for it. They never get anything positive. Yet when something happens that you're not expecting, the reaction is completely different. So say we would sit here now and a person was just sort of a partial apparition of a person was just to walk through the kitchen. You and I would just sit here, look at it, look at each other and say, did I just see that?
Oh, good point.
Did you see that? And you'd go, I did. But neither of us would get up and run out of the door.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, because from what I can gather, things always happen to people who are least expecting it, right? Or, you know, yeah. And maybe because I told you that we think the upstairs of the upper floor of the house is sometimes that they're haunted by children. The fact that you're aware of that means that you probably wouldn't hear or see anything because you're aware of it, and therefore it wouldn't make itself known, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, kind of that makes sense.
The expectation distorts your perception of the whole thing.
Right, it does.
If you've got no expectation, you just take it straight away as is.
Sure.
So you'll probably see one day, and it will literally just be in a place that you've never thought of being haunted, and something will just happen or walk through, or something will move, and you'll go, okay. And yeah. All of a sudden, it seems perfectly normal to see something paranormal.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. That's the odd thing I think about ghost sightings. They feel, when you actually experience it, it feels like a normal experience, except it's completely out of our realms of understanding.
Right.
It's an odd one. When you were talking about, obviously, I'm going back to like the church thing again, because it is such an unusual thing within storytelling and bizarre magic to include spirituality in terms of ghosts and maybe even sometimes like strange creatures and, you know, all of this type of stuff that defies nature. You've got your camp of people who like it but don't want to see it. Right. However, even out of the realms of the people who don't have any faith, you've still got the same amount of people who aren't comfortable with looking at or experiencing anything slightly spooky. Yeah. So it's still a limited market.
It is,
regardless of if you're religious or not.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, I had my birthday party at Simon Drake's House of Magic because people don't know what to expect,
Right.
a lot of people didn't come. They were scared of going because it was a private party and it's not publicised what happens there. And some people are like, I'm not going because I don't want to experience something that I might not be comfortable with.
Right, okay.
When everyone who went said it was the best night they'd ever had. So I can see, but I think, you know, you could put it into, it can be just portrayed in two camps, can't it?
Sure.
I get the same thing at my son's school, because I'm an artist and everyone else who, the other parents at my son's school, all have a more standard profession, like
Right.
they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're accountants,
Right.
so they belong to that pool. And then, you know, I turn up and it's like, there's that weird guy who, you know, go and have a look on his website, it's very strange and I'm not quite sure about him. So,
Yeah.
do you find when you go to church, there might be a few people like having a conversation, you walk over and they go and then just stop and then just go, hi Lothar, how are you?
Well, not yet.
Not yet.
Thankfully, not yet.
Well, that's good.
Now, and I've never really...
I get that.
Oh, okay.
But you know,
I haven't consciously paid attention either. I mean, because I go to church for a specific purpose.
yeah.
Right? And I mean, I go to hopefully experience God, or to give an experience of Him. That's my hope. It doesn't always happen. Actually, it doesn't happen a lot. It's very rare. But I still go with that expectation.
Yeah.
And I really don't go to socialize, chat with anybody, because
Tea mornings, biscuits.
That's right.
More tea vicar?
No, too many people for me within my community. They go to church to socialize with each other, which is fine.
It's a sense of community.
Exactly, it's a coming together of like-minded individuals. So yeah, fabulous.
But with tea and biscuits.
Yeah,
As a bonus.
that's right.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. It's not that bothers me.
No.
But for me, I often find it very... I find the socializing to be shallow. Well, if this ever reaches my community, I'll really be ostracized.
Well, no, but I know what you mean. It's more of an opportunity to gossip about what's happening, as opposed to actually talk about what they really should be there for.
That's right, exactly.
Like most business meetings always ends up about what you did at the weekend.
Yeah.
And at the end, actually, we should be talking about this.
Yeah.
They talk about it for 5 minutes, then meeting adjourned.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just I'm there. If I go to church, I go there to try and meet my God.
Yeah.
And if you want to come along and do that too as well, then we can have a wonderful time. And if not, that's fine. I'll say hello, and then I'll be on my way. There's nothing I want to talk to you about. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So unless you want some buttons pushed.
Yeah.
You know, if you're looking to be challenged and have some buttons pushed, hey, let's get into it.
Yeah.
Right?
That's good.
And sometimes I'll go there just because some people need their buttons pushed.
Yeah. Of course, that's what makes things fun.
Yeah.
So.
Right?
I know you brought Grace over with you. She was a Doomsday.
Yeah.
And so, how do the rest of your family? How do they sort of look at what you do? Are they fully into it and they love Dad's ghost stories?
Oh, they are so supportive.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had both my daughters involved at different times for 3 and 4 years, helping me with my seance, with the Echo Show. My son, I taught him some magic when he was younger. He did a show when he was 6 years old for the library. It's not his thing. He hasn't pursued it. He's gone into other stuff. But all my kids, I'm really blessed. All my kids think that I'm great. They love my magic. They love my bad jokes.
All kids love the dad's bad jokes.
Yeah. And but they love the magic these days in the last few years because it's not just been magic. It's about a story. There's something more meaty behind it.
Yeah.
And they understand to some extent the value with that. They realize that I take it seriously, that I take my faith seriously and inject it within the stories, and they really respect that.
Yeah.
And my wife is all... She doesn't believe... It was really funny. My wife doesn't believe in ghosts.
No.
No. there's no room in her theology for ghosts, and that's great.
Opposites attract.
Well, and we have. Sometimes she looks at me, just shakes her head. And, yeah, go play.
I get that.
Go on.
Yeah.
Thanks, honey. But she's very supportive with it, so that's fabulous.
Great.
Yeah.
So just to wrap up then.
Sure.
What does, looking into your crystal ball, what does the future hold for Lothar Malmberg in terms of what you're going to, what plans have you got? And I know you've got a few products that you kind of tempted us with at Doomsday. So there's,
Yeah, I've received some real encouragement in my time here, not just at Doomsday, but from some private meetings with some of the guys that were at Doomsday. So I think I'm going to look at some more manufacturing.
Yeah.
I've got about 3 or 4 items that I think have some value, and I'd like to get them out there.
I know you've demoed a few here with me, and I'm really impressed with them.
Yeah.
They're
and that's been encouraging for me, because I never looked at them in that light before, and I thought, well, this is... So it's been great. It's been good for me that way. It's opened some doors for thinking. I'm revaluing my Ghost Walk tour. I want to make it a little bit tighter yet.
Yeah.
It opens with magic, it closes with magic that fits within the Ghost Walk. So I want to tighten that up. My seance is changing already. I've got a new preface for it, and the ending of the show is different. I've already, in my time here, I've rewritten that. So now the future, manufacturing and marketing. Not marketing of my product, but rather marketing of in-home storytelling, like dinner theater, dinner parties. I want to really try and figure out how to get into that market, because I think there's a great venue for that, is someone's kitchen, dining room, living room.
Yeah, definitely. Right? Know a lot of people who do that, and it's popular.
Oh, okay.
It's one of those things, chain reaction. You do one, they have a great time.
Yeah.
Tell their friends.
Well, I'm open.
And it's, that's the way it grows. And
nobody's doing anything like that in my area. I don't even think in Canada.
No. Well, you're unique as it is.
Right.
In terms of what you believe and what you do.
Yeah.
You're already a unique person. You're pretty unique looking as well, which helps.
It does help, yes.
So if people wanted to know more about you or contact you, how would our listeners go about, if they're sat in front of their computer now? Do you have is there a web page or a Facebook page? Or
Facebook, there's no web page anymore. So Facebook is the first thing, under just my name, Lothar Malmberg.
Yeah.
You can Google Drumheller guided ghost walk tour, or Drumheller ghost, anything like that. Echo Spirit Theater. You'll get something up there on Facebook as well. So those are the 3 easiest ways to see what's going on, who I am, what I look like, that kind of stuff.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So that's the mysterious Lothar Malmberg finally exposed. So everyone who's ever wondered what he looks like, what he does, the name's been out there. I know a lot of people have said Lothar, and so having listened to this, they should know a hell of a lot, more about you, and hopefully go and check out your Ghost Walk page, and keep an eye out in the future for future releases from you.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you came to the UK.
Me too.
Yeah, hope you've had a good time.
Fabulous.
Good, but I know you're itching to get back to Canada now.
30 days, it's a long time. Time to go home.
Jeez, I can, today's the day you go back, and it's nice to end on a, positive note and record it for eternity, hopefully, unless they take iTunes down in the future. So I'd like to thank you for coming, and thanks for a great interview.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.
I saw. I'm not sure what I saw. An apparition of some sort. Looked right at me. It had red eyes, like fire. It spat blue flames. And it jumped.
higher than any human or animal could possibly jump.
Hello and welcome back. And this time we have our Paranormal Corner. And this month we have a very special guest as well, because what we're talking about is of the Victorian era. And we're talking about Spring Hill Jack this episode. And we brought in a very special guest this time, Mr. Paul Voodini, who is a lover and an expert in all things Victorian. And I'd like to welcome Paul to the show again.
Hi there, nice to be here again.
Hi, Paul.
Hello, mate. How you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Fantastic. All the better for having you on the show again, Paul. Always a delight and a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure to be here.
You know, and the only other Blue Rondola Turk fan that I know of. So
that's right. The two of us who bought their album, I believe.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think I got two by mistake, and I sent you a copy of the CD. So
that's right. You did. You were very kind. I couldn't find it on CD. I used to have it on vinyl back in the 80s, obviously. And then Freddie was very happy very kind to send me a copy of the CD, which was wonderful.
Who's this?
A band called Blue Rondo a la Turk. They were part of the sort of new romantic scene back in the 80s. They were friends with Spandau Ballet. They sort of came from that sort of London art school sort of scene. And for a boy like me living in the out in the northern wastelands of Sheffield, these guys who were these cool London cats were sort of like heroes that I looked up to and aspired to be.
I suppose you had Human League up there, though.
Yes, we did. It was it was great actually, because we had the Human League.
OMD was it as well?
No, ABC. Not OMD. ABC. OMD sounds like a Jackson song.
He was Scouts, I think.
Thompson Twins were down the road in Chesterfield. So Sheffield was a hotbed of new romantic activity.
But not of Latin beats, you see. You had electronic stuff.
That's right.
And Blue Rondola brought the sunshine to Sheffield.
That's right.
That's why I've never heard of them, because I've never been a fan of Latin beats. And,
you're missing out on it.
Miami Sound Machine or anything, it makes me feel very strange.
Apparently, Kid Creole the Coconuts, he came from Miami or Florida or somewhere, and he actually settled down and got married to a girl in Doncaster, just down the road from Sheffield. So, Sheffield was the centre of all things cool in the 80s.
Donny Lass.
Donny Lass.
Blue Rondo. I mean, Latin beats. I think Dan, you might groove to them as well, because they're full on. It's full on their music, and they used to have little hats, little moustaches, smart suits. They look cool,
suits and keychains and
the hats and the moustache kind of does it for me. So I might have to tune in.
That's enough. That is enough. Yeah, no, they're good. I mean, me and Paul both saw them live, so And although as exciting as they are, their dance moves were very dramatic, weren't they, Paul?
Oh yeah, the dancers were great. They used to have dancers on stage, and not even female dancers, not scantily clad dancers. The lads that used to dance, it was very Northern Soul inspired dancing, very full on, very energetic. Yeah, it was what's not to like, I say.
But although there were a few jumps and twirls on stage, there was nothing as dramatic as Spring Hill Jack. He would have been good in Blue Rondola Turk, I think.
I was wondering how you were going to segue into Spring Hill Jack from new romantic Sheffield band.
Romantic dancing meets Victorian monsters,
I was beginning to think this was a podcast about new romantics.
Yeah, anyone who's never listened to the show before, who's specifically tuned in for the discussion on Spring Hill Jack, then stay tuned, because we will get onto it, but we do like to go off on a bit of a tangent, because... he was a bit of a Blue Rondola Turk at this time. I mean, Spring Hill Jack was very dapper. He was always like a superhero, like a Batman kind of feeling, I suppose, but a baddie is how he's seen. And I feel that and the fact that he could leap very high was quite amazing. I mean, you get all these films now, all these Marvel things and stuff like this, but this is like a real life. It is, and it's like steampunk. It's steampunk before steampunk was fashionable. Before you had, the men in the trench coats with the goggles on their top hats. Spring Hill Jack. He had all of the paraphernalia, the strange chest contraptions and the ability to jump, and almost a superhero space-like air about him. And well before his time. And I suppose that's why Paul is attracted to the whole Spring Hill Jack story.
Yeah, absolutely. It's as you and Freddie have sort of pointed out already, he was really like a supervillain of his day. If you search for Spring Hill Jack online and you look for any images on Google or wherever, the press reports of the time, the illustrations that were in the newspapers, you look at it and you think, well, that's like a Victorian Batman or a Victorian superhero. He's got the mask on, the helmet on, he's got the cloak, and very much really would go on, I think, in many ways to inspire people like Batman and the Shadow and even Doctor Strange. That whole mysterious cloaked look really comes from Spring Hill Jack.
Yeah.
And he could climb walls. He could leap over high fences. He had claws for hands. Some people said he had red eyes, and quite a menacing character, but very, very sort of superhero-ish in his appearance.
I think. Sorry, you go, Freddie. You're right.
That's what I say. Is the fact is that he featured in sort of like Penny Dreadfuls at the time, and they were kind of almost like the sort of Marvel comics of their day, really, because they had these exciting stories in, and they were spread over a certain amount of issues sometimes and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
Do you know what? It does make you wonder whether Marvel and DC and the superhero thing that came out in America, I suppose, the 20s, 30s, whenever it started, whether it's actually inspired by those stories.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Did,
I was going to say the Penny Dreadfuls, as you rightly say, were the Marvel, the DC comics of their day. They were full of gore and murder. A lot of them proudly announced that these were true stories of true crime, but it was glorified. It was built. It was. What sold the Penny Dreadfuls was the stories of gore and death and murder. And in those days, of course, people didn't have TVs or radios or the internet. And so people found out about these stories, about these real-life cases through the Penny Dreadfuls. And really, Spring Heel Jack became famous through the Penny Dreadfuls, through the recounting of the stories, people saying that they've been attacked by him, young girls claiming that he'd molested them, grabbed them, hypnotized them, molested them, and it was the Penny Dreadfuls later on would become the comics, because of course the Penny Dreadfuls moved from Britain to the USA, with our sort of a common heritage, common culture. America had their own versions of the Penny Dreadfuls, and they would absolutely go on to become the Marvel comics of the 30s and the 40s.
Yeah, so there's a direct connection there, And the thing is with Spring Heel Jack, the thing that's interesting about this is a lot of the Penny Dreadful stuff is usually elaborated upon, when Sweeney Todd originally came out in the Penny Dreadful, and that obviously people do think it's real, a true story. But from what I've researched myself is that it does appear to be a work of fiction.
Yeah, if you go to the London Dungeon, they've got the Sweeney Todd part of the tour of the dungeon, and it's portrayed as if it was a real life event. Someone selling meat pies and the demon barber. So it's, I'm surprised that Spring Heel Jack isn't more popular today, given the climate when it comes to how everyone is into Marvel and DC and how the geek chic thing is kind of taken over the whole media. I would have thought Spring Heel Jack would have been,
Yeah, I think what's happened though is because of the similarities in the names and the similarity of the timescale, the Spring Heel Jack mythos has been really almost swallowed up by the Jack the Ripper story. Obviously, they both got the Jack name in their title, and I think a lot of the original Spring Heel Jack sort of myth and legend got swallowed up by the Jack the Ripper myth, and the two almost became part of the same story in a way. And in many ways, it's a shame that Jack the Ripper. Of course, it's a shame that Jack the Ripper happened. What am I saying? But it's a shame, as far as Spring Heel Jack is concerned, that Jack the Ripper, happened sort of 30 years later, and now as we look back, it all melds into one story, really.
But it does predate Jack the Ripper by a fair few, almost like 50 or 60 years. It's like 1837 was the first sort of official sighting of Spring Heel Jack. So he had the crown long before Saucy Jack did.
That's right, yes. And it goes back really before that, when the printed presses first started putting out pamphlets and newspapers for mass consumption, that's when the first stories of ghosts and demons walking the streets of London first started to appear, that would lead on to the stories of Spring Heel Jacks.
One of the things I find interesting about Spring Heel Jack is that when you look at the Penny Dreadfuls, when you look at, say Sweeney Todd, that's a work of fiction. Dick Turpin was based on an exaggerated story because he was a common thug, like a Frankie Fraser of his time, but they made out into this dandy highwayman, like an Adamant-esque highwayman. But the Spring Heel Jack stories seem to be based on documented accounts.
That's right. People actually came forward and told their stories to the newspapers, to the Penny Dreadfuls, and to the police. So something happened somewhere, whether it was just, a drunken bloke wearing a cape, because obviously in those days wearing a cape wasn't as unusual as perhaps it is today, and these were just drunken blokes who fancied a fondle and tried to grab these girls, and the story got exaggerated, and the girls who were obviously traumatized let their imaginations run away with them, and started saying, oh yes, he had red eyes and he breathed flames, etc. But there was something happened. There was a basis to the story. It wasn't completely just fabricated. Something happened that made these people come forward and tell their stories.
I mean, the description of Spring Heel Jack that they gave in the 1800s, they had really no point of reference in order to get a description from previously. Like if you were to nowadays, you have such a fantastical array of science fiction to pick any form of description from. Nothing really sounds that out of the ordinary. But in Victorian times, to have a man who's dressed in almost like an oilskin, like a wetsuit, with a contraption on his chest, with the ability to jump literally, from church spires down to the ground, with red eyes and breathing blue fire, where the hell do you get those descriptions from in the first place, unless they actually saw that and described exactly what they saw?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it would have been easier, I guess, for them to call him a demon or even some sort of fairy. But obviously, they didn't go down that line. They described, as you say, somebody wearing a black outfit with a cloak, with red eyes, breathing flames. And as you say, there would have been nothing before that they could have referenced, that could have influenced them, that could have, subconsciously put those ideas into their mind. So you do have to ask where those original ideas came from, and if they hadn't seen that, why did they make that up? Because there's no cultural reason for them to make that up.
No, and there was organised hunting parties at night to go and try and track down Spring Heel Jack, and on numerous occasions, I think you'll back me up on this, Paul, he was actually cornered to the point where they almost had him, and he was just said to vanish into thin air.
Yeah, that's right. He either leaped to safety or simply vanished or ran up the side of a wall to get away from people.
With the batarang.
Yeah, that's right. I must just mention a book that takes the Spring Heel Jack legend and turns it into a novel, but is very accurate in its portrayal of the abilities and how the man looked. It's called The Strange Affair of Spring Heel Jack by a writer called Mark Hodder. And it's often seen as a steampunky book, but it's not really steampunk. It's more of a gas lamp mystery science fiction book, very much in the vein of H.G. Wells. Okay. So if anybody's interested in that in Spring Heel Jack, they should certainly give that a read, because all of the characters, I think there was a girl called Mary Stevens, who was one of the girls who was attacked and gave her story to the police and to the press. She's in there. It's very accurate portrayal of the events that actually happened, but then sort of wrapped in a sci-fi story as well. So I'd recommend that.
Excellent.
Brilliant. Are you aware, Paul, that when the last reported sighting of Spring Heel Jack took place?
As we've already touched upon, when we were talking about new romanticism, I come from Sheffield. I live in a city called Sheffield. In the 1970s, Spring Heel Jack reappeared in an area of Sheffield called Attercliffe. And it's a fascinating story that Attercliffe, people who don't live in Sheffield won't know it at all, but it used to be a very industrial area, lots of factories, lots of steel works, which Sheffield is famous for. And all of the workforce that used to work in the steel works or worked in the factories used to live in terraced houses. And in the 1970s, a prowler who was later reported in the local press as being Spring Heel Jack Returns was seen running along the rooftops of these terrace houses. When people would see him, they'd see him leap from the terrace houses for the roofs down to the street and then run up walls. And he was quite a well-known terror back in the 1970s in the Attercliffe area of Sheffield. One of those fascinating accounts was in the olden days when they built these terrace houses in the Victorian times. They all had lofts. They all had attics. But what they did, all of the loft space in these terraced houses was communal. There were no walls in the lofts. So you could go to the loft and you could literally walk down the length of the street, walking through the loft. And one day this guy went up into his loft to put something into storage, and he saw a dark figure standing nearby him. This guy shouted out, "Oh, who are you?" and chased this guy along the whole length of the street, running through the loft spaces of each house in turn. And the guy thought to himself, "It's okay, I'll get him at the end, because when he gets to the last house, there's nowhere for him to go." And of course, the guy runs down, gets to the last house, and this Spring Hill Jack character just fades to mist and just disappears into thin air. So the whole legend and mythos behind Spring Hill Jack didn't die out in the 1800s. No. Even in the 1970s, in what we may regard as a fairly modern era, he was still causing terror and freaking people out and baffling the police in Sheffield.
Wow! And did you know that the last sighting, actual recorded sighting with him, was in 2012?
Really? Where was that?
Yeah, I can't remember what it is now, but
I heard about this one.
Yeah, it's a family, wasn't it?
Yeah, in a car. And this figure ran across the road and bounded over either a wall or a building and was just vanished like a caped figure.
Wow.
Banstead, they were from, wherever that is.
Where's that? Sorry.
Banstead.
Ooh, yeah, I'm not sure where that is.
Epsom, near Epsom, Surrey, I think it is.
Okay, so he appears all over the UK. I mean, there are some other examples of Spring Hill Jack type figures in the US as well. Obviously, you've got the Mothman from the Mothman prophecies. Very similar. Winged, flying, red eyes, terrifying. So there are the similarities. I mean, one thing that really gets me with these cryptozoological cases, I mean, I know the Spring Hill Jack doesn't really fall into a cryptid type category. However, there's a lot of cryptids and paranormal figures always have glowing red eyes. This is one thing that's always puzzled me, and I've thought about it long and hard. Why would something like that have glowing red eyes? I mean, there's reports of Sasquatch in some cases, especially UK type Sasquatches, always have glowing red eyes, whereas the US type Sasquatch doesn't. But it would appear that any sort of paranormal figure that has the ability to reappear and then just vanish into thin air, one of its traits is always the glowing red eyes. And I just have no idea why that would be. Any thoughts on that one, guys?
Well, maybe it's because, as you know, human beings don't have it, I don't believe, but a lot of animals, cats, dogs, foxes, etc., if you shine a light at their eye, that light is reflected back, isn't it? So when you're driving down the road, if there's a fox standing in the middle of the road, you will always see the sort of twin points of light from the eyes. Yeah. So perhaps it's something to do with the lens that they have on their eyes.
Well, you get red eye, don't you? You get red eye when you have your photograph taken, and that's just a reflection of light off the back of the eye. However, I mean, in these cases, I get the impression that if you were to be in a completely dark environment, these eyes would physically glow out of the darkness.
Yes.
Making a cup of tea, Freddie?
Yes.
Sounds like it. 2 sugars.
Yeah. Any biscuits?
Biscuits, Jaffa cakes.
Oh, I don't like those. It's like eating
Jaffa cakes.
It's like eating toilet duck with chocolate on top.
I never tried toilet duck with chocolate on top.
Yeah, there's little cheaper, like when you stick the little blobs in the toilet, and they've got like it's like the top of a Jaffa cake.
Oh, I know the things you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. I've only eaten a few. Just when I was hard up, didn't have any money.
They're always tempting, and things you get in your urinals, they smell minty, don't they?
They do, yeah. But enough of Freddie's Jaffa cakes. So yeah, the red eyes, they just puzzle me, and it was only sort of reading into the Spring Hill Jack story that I thought, well, I didn't know he had glowing red eyes originally. It's just strange that he has that same characteristic as many other paranormal characters. I even think the Jersey Devil has glowing red eyes as well.
He does, yeah.
Yeah.
The thing is, I mean, it's strange because it seems to be a mixture of something supernatural, like demonic, but also somebody who has some sort of device, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like mechanical. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very strange. I mean, it's obviously kind of an athletic kind of character. I mean, all these stories about him being an athletic person who likes touching up girls. I just thought Jimmy Savile could have been the modern Spring Hill Jack, couldn't he? But if you was, I was interested in both of this. If you was casting a film on Spring Hill Jack, say a big Hollywood studio said, "Look, hey guys, we're doing a Spring Hill Jack film.
Awesome.
Who do you think could play him? It'd be awesome. It'd be out of this world. Who would you choose? Who do you think would be the best actor to portray him, considering the look of them, how athletic they could be? Who do you think would be the best person to cast?"
I personally think the guy who played Loki in the Avengers films would make a good Spring Hill Jack. He's kind of quite slender, very English, and quite. He can be quite stern.
I don't know him.
Bit of a bad streak. I can't remember his name. He's in the Jaguar adverts at the moment.
Oh, right. People say Avengers to me. I always think of Steed and Emma Peel and stuff like that.
You would. I'll tell you what, I have my computer right in front of me now. I'm going to actually find out what his name is so our listeners can have a point of reference. Avengers Loki, he's played by... Okay, it's Tom Hiddleston.
Yeah, I know who you mean, yeah. And you're right, he's perfect for the role.
Yeah, I think he's in the new Guillermo del Toro movie, Crimson Peak, as the head vampire dude.
So I might know him after that.
Yeah, you might do. Yeah, but I think. What about you, Paul?
I can't disagree with that at all. I think when you think of Spring Heel Jack in your mind, he does have that sort of villainous look, but also that sort of very English sort of aspect to him as well. I was just thinking how you would pitch the movie to a Hollywood studio, and you have the elevator pitch where you have to give your pitch within 10 seconds, and it's a yay or nay whether they advance with it. I think you just have to say it's a Victorian Batman, but Batman's evil, and that's your elevator pitch.
And likes breasts.
Yeah.
Yes, like fondling breasts, and there you go. They'd say, okay, we'll take it to development.
Yeah.
Get us a script.
Or Confessions of a Victorian Monster. That could be.
Yes.
We've done with Robin Asquith.
Yeah, that's a good title. That.
No, I don't know if I think Louis Spence could do it because he's quite athletic. He could jump 8 feet in the air and backflip over walls.
And if you look at the pictures of Spring Heel Jack, if you do a Google image search and look at the drawings of Spring Heel Jack, he is rather camp. He jumps with his hands sort of clenched. Quite, if you look at the pictures, he looks rather flamboyant the way he jumps around.
Does. And he has a very neat little moustache and beard as well, very neatly trimmed.
He does.
A bit Mark Harmon, doesn't he, sometimes?
Yeah.
Who did a song about Spring Heel Jack, actually. Mark Harmon did an album called The Tyburn Tree, and it's all about myths and things around Victorian London and stuff like that. There's a song about Jack the Ripper, and there's one on there called Spring Heel Jack about it.
And it's, of course, that ties in with what we were talking about earlier about New Romanticism as well, because he was in Saucelle, of course.
Of course.
Exactly.
And,
all ties in.
Gay men do quite like breasts. I don't want any
but not female breasts though.
No, they do. I mean, I don't want anyone writing in and complaining. I do, I am quite sort of universal in my friends, and I have got some gay friends, and they love female breasts. They have like a bit of a fixation with them. So the fact that you have some flamboyant man in leather.
Who likes breasts?
That's
case closed. He was quite clearly gay.
He doesn't have a motive for doing what he's doing. He doesn't. I mean, he's quite violent in the way he comes across. He obviously attacks people, but he doesn't steal objects. He doesn't vandalise anything. He has no motive other than to jump down, scare people, grope the breasts, and disappear again.
Yeah, he doesn't rob them, doesn't eat them, doesn't just sort of gets off on scaring them, I think.
There's I think it's more of a comedy. Yeah, but there's more of a dark comedy in there than an action film, I think. With
An evil Benny Hill.
Yeah, with a bit of I say every time you grope someone and then disappear.
Kenneth Williams could have been a good Spring Heel Jack.
Yeah, absolutely.
Carry on, Jack. Carry on springing.
Yeah, that would have been the best thing. I mean, the thing is that why I'm thinking, there's so many sightings of him, because originally when I first heard about it years ago, I thought it was like a London thing, because it seems to be attached to, do you know what I mean, the steep, foggy streets of Victorian London. But he gets around, like the Beach Boys, he gets around, and he's been in Liverpool and all sorts of places all around the country.
Yeah,
they did Birmingham, Glasgow, and as I say, Sheffield. Yeah.
I think he's even been spotted in the US. There are reports of him being spotted in the US as well.
I mean, it could have been a copycat thing. Maybe people in those days were as sort of, sheep-like as they are now.
Yeah.
It's like, like you see people say, oh, Breaking Bad is brilliant. Oh, I'll watch every episode then because everyone else is. Maybe I'm going to dress up in an outfit, jump over walls, have claws on my hands and touch up women. Oh, great, I'll do that. Everyone else is doing it. It might be a fad. It might be
I actually have a funny story that may account for, if you hear about any reports of Spring Heel Jack in the the Atcliffe one was 1970s, but I was nowhere near Atcliffe. In the 1970s, when I was about 12 years old, I used to think I was a superhero, as many people never tire of me telling them. And I remember one night I was patrolling the streets of suburban Sheffield, quite literally with a mask on and a black cape. And this young couple, probably about 18, were walking up the street, and I ran in front of them with my cape and my mask on, right in front of them across the road, and completely freaked them out. And they probably tell this story to this day of this time when they were walking home from the pub and they were confronted by this caped demon, which was really me, 12 years old, patrolling the streets of Sheffield looking for crime. And so, yes, I'm probably accountable for some of the stories of Sheffield Spring-Heeled Jacks inadvertently.
It's you.
Were you able to jump very high, though? Were you a bit of a jumper?
No, I sadly had no superpowers, which is always a disadvantage for a superhero.
I have another story that could account for a few Spring-Heeled Jack sightings as well, but these would have been in places abroad, mainly like places like Gibraltar. We used to have a character called the Black Bantam who would appear, and usually when the lads were out on the piss, the Black Bantam would appear in the streets and run down the roofs of cars, especially sort of down like Gibraltar High Street where all the pubs are. And the Black Bantam would be dressed in combat boots, leather cycling shorts, one of those crisscross bondage vests, a black cape, and a naval issue gas mask. And no one knew who he was. It was just the Black Bantam. There's the Black Bantam. It always occurred when there was about 4 or 5 ships in at the same time as well. So, you couldn't say, "Oh, he was off your ship," because there was lots of other ships there. So the Black Bantam was very Spring-Heeled Jack-like in that respect. But he didn't, and he probably did like women's breasts, but he didn't breathe blue fire.
That's a shame, isn't it?
What sailors are like breasts? That's what I say.
We need a new Spring-Heeled Jack. I mean, 2012 is pretty close for like a recent sighting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's almost like it's whether it is a demon or whether it is just somebody just like a fad or something. Someone taking on the mantle. It could have been generations of one Spring-Heeled Jack passing on to his grandson, who passed on to his grandson, and they keep the family tradition up. Who knows?
Yeah.
I think there is a Facebook page that follows Spring-Heeled Jack and links any possible sightings of him. If just go on Facebook and look at for Spring-Heeled Jack. He has got his own little group.
Brilliant.
Fantastic. And the Bantam guy who was in the Navy, was that sort of something that was known among all the guys who were in the Navy and one of them would decide to do it? Or was it one guy who did it every time, do you think? Or
I think it was one guy, but no one knew who he was.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, everyone would say, we're going to see the Black Bantam tonight. Or, I remember specifically coming out of the Donkey's flip-flop in Gibraltar, and all of a sudden everyone's screaming, "It's the Black Bantam!" And then this guy leapt on the roof of a car, and there was probably about 20 parked cars down this road, and he ran across the roofs of all the cars while loads of lads cheered, and he just disappeared down an alleyway, and that was it, and no one saw him again.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy, isn't it?
So he could have been a resident of Gibraltar, but I think he appeared in different places around the world as well. I know, I think he appeared in the Gulf when they were refueling in Abu Dhabi. He's quite well known around the armed forces. As to whether he still exists nowadays, he's probably getting on a bit, and he wouldn't squeeze into all that leather very well anymore, especially being a sailor. They tend to get a bit of a beer porn shaft when they hit the 30s through the excessive drinking.
A beer-bellied Spring-Heeled Jack, that'd be quite good, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if they made a budget film with Spring-Heeled Jack nowadays, it would be your standard slightly chubby steampunk chap with a obligatory goatee beard, goggles, and maybe those boots with the big metal plates on the front.
You can just imagine it, all stuff that he's bought online from steampunk.com, all very shiny and new looking.
Yeah.
That sort of stuff. Hats with the goggles. I don't know why them hats with the goggles, they do annoy me. They do really annoy me. They just look silly. And I don't think anyone in Victoria knew. I don't think old Spring-Heeled Jack would have worn them, would he?
No.
It's just become a bit of a cliche, really. I think that the goggles and the things, the steampunk, that's all become a bit of a cliche, which is a shame in many ways because for a long time, I've been obviously interested in Victorian science fiction, which of course steampunk ties into. It's just a shame, like all movements tend to eventually become a bit cliched and become a bit tired, which I think is why with steampunk these days, everybody just associates it with top hats, with goggles, and sort of cogs on everything, which is a shame, really, because there is a lot of fantastic literature out there and some very creative people, but it's just a shame that as with all sort of movements, cults, etc., they do in the end sort of get boiled down to a cliche, like with punk, spiky hair and leather jacket with studs in. Everything gets distilled eventually into its sort of single little common denominator, which is what's happened with steampunk, I think.
Yeah,
definitely.
It is a shame, but it's just the way things go, especially in everything just gets devoured quicker these days through the media, quicker than it used to. For example, with, like you say, punk, the only sort of outlets were like the charts and obviously going to a record shop and physically buying the records and being part of the scene. Whereas to be part of any scene nowadays, like steampunk, it's just a case of going online and it's literally all there in front of you. And before you know it, there's steampunk everything out there. A fifth of the time it would normally take with any other thing in the past.
Yeah. I was just going to say it hasn't really moved on and developed into anything else. I mean, we've sort of been talking about punk, and we've earlier on we talked about new romantics, and certainly in London, the original people who were on the punk scene were the same people who would later become the new romantics and the goths.
And the post-punk, the post-punk scene.
I mean, the first name that was given by the press to the new romantics was Peacock Punks, because they were seen as very much similar to punks. They were the same people, in fact, who were on that scene in London. And when bands such as like The Exploited and all of that sort of, when all punk started to look like Sid Vicious, the guys who were on the scene originally despaired of it and thought, this isn't what we were doing, and they moved on to new romanticism and then into the goth scene. It's a shame that steampunk hasn't really developed into anything else. It hasn't sort of it hasn't branched off in any other interesting directions. It's sort of got a little bit stuck with that goggles and cogs kind of feel.
Does it have a music scene?
There is, but I'm not a fan of the music, to be honest. It's a bit strange. It's a bit sort of almost like country meet punk. It's almost like Victorian punk, if that makes sense. And it's not really my kind of music at all. No. Whenever I think of steampunks and sort of Victorian science fiction, I always think that the theme tune should again be the new romantic 80s electronica, which for me fits in with it a lot more than sort of thrashing guitars.
Yeah, it's like Metropolis. When they got the film Metropolis and they actually put 80s sort of electronic music over it. They had Freddie Mercury, Love Kills. Do you remember they reissued Fritz Lang Metropolis? And that kind of worked because the music was quite futuristic. Do you know what I mean? I mean, steampunk, surely Human League, the early stuff, the first album.
Yeah, that's more steampunk. That would be ideal.
Being boiled and stuff like that.
Thrashy guitars means menace. I mean, like music, when people say about putting on, like a paranormal night or like a seance, and they want to play music in a bizarre performance, it's always stuff like Marilyn Manson. I thought that doesn't create menace. It's not menacing music. I mean, something like the Elephant Man theme is creepy. It's menacing, and it sounds very Victorian. Whereas when you put sort of thrashy guitars and someone screaming their head off, it loses the whole vibe. It's like when you get a horror film, like a modern horror film, and the soundtrack has some sort of rock song they've shoehorned into it to try and put on the soundtrack album. To me, it ruins the atmosphere.
Yeah, I've always
orchestral stuff.
I've always thought the Victorians had access to the same technology that we've got now. Their music would have been sort of the 80s electronica. They would, if they'd have had access to synthesizers, etc. I'm sure the Victorians would have lapped up sort of 80s synth sound.
Gilbert and Sullivan would win the soft sell of their day.
That's right. Yes, absolutely.
Funny thing saying about things like steampunk and that. What I find with these sort of genres, when it first comes out, the people that are genuinely into it, they get into it. People that understand the whole thing, the whole concept of it. Do you know what I mean? They're into the whole lifestyle and they understand it fully. They're the original people that sort of take this on. The sort of, I suppose, early supporters, so to speak. But then what happens is because it becomes a bit popular, bandwagon jumpers come in. And because they don't really understand it, they grab a few elements from something like, hat with goggles, leather jacket. That's all I need. Great, I'm a steampunk now. And I think that happened with, like you say, with punk. people thought if I buy a jacket with zips on it, therefore I am a punk, and it kind of dilutes down the whole thing.
Yeah,
I think that's happens with a lot of things. When you get people that don't really understand it, jumping onto it just because they feel it's a thing to be into, that's what tends to kill things, and that's what's happened with steampunk, I feel.
Yeah. I think it needs to develop into something new.
Yeah, it's like people buying Ramones t-shirts. They haven't got a clue who they are.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you see a lot of that. Yeah,
I know. A funny clip I saw was that I don't know. There's a bloke. His name's Tim something. I think he does like sports programs, and I think it was Sunday Brunch. He's a bit of a trendy sort of TV presenter, but he's on the program wearing a Ramones t-shirt, and I think it was Simon Pegg was on there and said, "Oh, you a fan of the Ramones, are you?" And he said, "Oh, yeah. Name a member of the band then." So he looked down at the t-shirt and tries to read them. No. Okay, name 3 of their albums then. Name 3 of their songs, and he sort of stumped. He just bought it because everyone else is wearing it, so therefore I'll wear it.
The ironic thing is, if he's wearing the Ramones badge that's got the eagle on it, it's actually got the band name members around the edge on the circle.
Yeah, he was looking down to read the names. I couldn't remember. I'll tell you the funny thing about this. These people that are being hip to try and jump on a bandwagon by wearing a t-shirt. There's a singer called Plan 9. He's like a hip-hop or rap type artist, very trendy.
Yes.
He decided to buy a very trendy t-shirt.
Plan B.
Plan B.
Plan B, that's it. Plan B, yeah.
Not Plan 9 from outer space.
Plan 9 from outer space, yeah, that'd be better than Plan B. Plan B, yeah, I don't this sort of... But he thought as a photo shoot, he'd go and buy a trendy band t-shirt from the past. Like everyone's wearing Ramones or Guns N' Roses. He'd get a trendy band t-shirt, pose in his t-shirt, and say, look how cool I am, I've got an obscure band t-shirt on. So this photo session done with this t-shirt he bought, and it was a band called Screwdriver, who are a neo-Nazi band from the late 70s. Yeah. He didn't realise that. so in the, if people don't do the research and try to be too hip, they can end up in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I had a friend at school when we was into the Sex Pistols, so we had all like the Sex Pistols t-shirts and bits and bobs. So the sort of the beginning of my goth phase. I kind of went punk, then post-punk in about sort of the space of 3 months. However, I had a friend who wasn't into any of that sort of stuff at all, so he thought he'd jump on the bandwagon. So he went into town, bought what he thought was a Sex Pistols album, listened to it and said it sounded like a load of shit. And when he actually showed it us, it was an S Express album.
Oh no, that's funny. You used to get these records in the 70s. The Paul probably remembers. You go and sound like Woolworths, and you'd buy and it sounds like Pink Floyd, right? And you think, oh great, and it'd be very cheap, about £1 or something like that. And you'd look in very small writing, a tribute to Pink Floyd performed by Funky Junction, and the group that did all these bands was called Funky Junction. And it's really, really small writing. So you think, oh, great, people buy things like Black Sabbath or the best of the Beatles, but it's very small writing, as performed by Funky Junction.
That's right. So do you remember the Top of the Pops albums?
They were.
They were
Funky Junction were like that.
Yeah.
That's right. Elton John played a lot of those. Elton John, in the 60s, he's the session man who played a lot of those.
Yeah, they're quite good. They're quite good covers.
Good covers, yeah. Oh, yes.
I think Spring Hill Jack, when he's not, when he wasn't prancing around the Victorian streets at night time, I can imagine him going back to his lair, which was obviously going to be in some tower overlooking London, over the rooftops, as a kind of almost like an electronic music pioneer, experimenting.
That's right.
With various old synthesizers. And
definitely.
Yeah.
Making like Kraftwerk type sounds bubbling out from this sort of tower in Victorian London. And the frequencies from these sounds were so disturbing that they twisted the mind of somebody who became Jack the Ripper as a child, screwed up his brain cells. There you go.
Yeah,
conspiracy
ties it all together. Yeah,
it's almost like an electronic gay version of Penny Dreadful that we've come up with over the last sort of 45 minutes.
See, New Romantic Victoriana. That's where it's. Forget steampunk. That's where it's at. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's right.
I mean,
New Romantic Victoriana.
I've not seen the latest season of Penny Dreadful, but I don't know if Spring Hill Jack is in it or not, but he seems like a perfect character for the show. He is.
He's perfect for it. He's not in the latest series, but he should be. I'd be very surprised if they continue to make subsequent series if he's not touched upon, because really he's just waiting to be tapped, as it were, by Penny Dreadful. Yeah. So I'm sure in subsequent series he will make some sort of appearance.
But if they give him a hat with goggles on, I'm going to write and complain.
Yes, I think if they do that, they'll have sold themselves very short.
Definitely. Oh yes. I mean, and there you go. And then they could get Louis Spence in Penny Dreadful.
They could. I mean, one part of the Spring Hill Jack story I didn't know that was linked or could possibly be linked is, diving back into the paranormal corner side of things, is the Devil's Footprints, which appeared in Devon in 1855, which is a well-known story over here. I don't know how well it was reported globally, but basically it was a series of cloven hoof footprints appeared literally overnight on the fresh fallen snow. And they went for, was it 100 miles, maybe more? But they appeared to jump rivers, jump walls. And there we go, it was 40 to 100 miles. Obviously, that's quite a varying distance there. But the cloven footprints appeared on top of walls, on roofs, jumping rivers, and they were just in one continuous line. And maybe that could have been Spring Heel Jack moving from his town to town type thing. He's obviously spread out all over the country. He went on foot at night time and had cloven hooves to boot.
Yeah, yep. And he could have had. I'm assuming from what description I read that he had some kind of stilts with springs in them. Do you know what I mean? Like they were
it's like that, isn't it?
Where, I mean, that's what made him a bit like Zebedee from. That sort of spring on the bottom, Zebedee from Magic Roundabout. Yeah, that kind of buoyancy.
The book that I mentioned earlier, the Strange Affair of Spring Heel Jack, actually has him wearing almost like spring-loaded stilts in order to effect his escapes, and it ties into the story in other ways as well. But yes, that stilts and spring-loaded mechanism is something that's been touched on before. Yeah.
So what do we think he really was? Was it a demon? Was it a time traveler? Was it a trapped alien?
I think he was probably a human. I think it's probably as I said earlier, the wearing of a cloak in 1837 was not an unusual thing. Rather than wearing a raincoat, most men of middle class or upper class would wear a cloak. So I think there was some bloke, maybe drunk, who'd accosted this girl wearing a cloak. She's traumatized by it, so she tells him about the cloak. She tells him he was tall. Her mind conjures up all sorts of things about his hands were like claws, etc. This gets reported in the Penny Dreadful, and then subsequently anybody is freaked out, is scared, or is assaulted on the streets of London. They have read about Spring Heel Jack, and so they say, it happened to me as well. I was walking down the street and this bloke in a cape jumped out, and people start exaggerating what they've experienced. They want to convey the sense of awfulness that they felt, so they exaggerate the story, and it's suddenly anybody who's attacked, it's Spring Heel Jack.
A case of hysteria, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, bad things happen. People get mugged, people get attacked, people get molested. And once this sort of hysteria develops, it's very easy. And the quickest way to convey what happened is to say, I was attacked by Spring Heel Jack, because straight away, the police have got a good idea. People understand the story straight away, and the hysteria spreads.
Yeah. I agree with that too, and I feel that at night also when they all took place at night, most of these sort of sightings, and people come out of these gin palaces and stuff like that, and I feel the stuff around then, the alcohol was quite strong from what I can gather from what I've read about it, and I feel that if someone jumped out on you, you probably would, your memory would be a bit blurred afterwards, and you might exaggerate things, because if something made people into like a almost hallucinogenic state, they may have these images they've read about in Penny Dreadfuls and put it upon what they're seeing here.
There was a lot of drugs about, wasn't there? There was drugs and
opiates were used as quite commonly used as painkillers or to calm your nerves. So half the time, people walking around the streets of Victorian London were, literally off their heads on opiates, using them as painkillers or as little perk-me-ups to get them through the day. So, it wouldn't be unusual for most people that you encountered walking down the streets of London to be have taken some form of opiate or other. And as you say, you combine that with the gin that was drunk. And as Freddie said, the gin back in those days was a lot stronger than the gins you would get now, brewed in baths in the top of overlooking public houses. People could quite easily hallucinate or certainly exaggerate things that they've seen or encountered.
I mean, you've got to remember as well that when we have a blackout nowadays in the UK, because there's so much street lighting, it's not until you go outside and use candlelight or an inferior form of lighting that you realise how little light it actually casts out. So even though London was a city that did have lighting, it would be nowhere near as well lit as what it is nowadays. And darkness plays tricks on your eyes so easily, as you say, combined with the alcohol and the drugs and just generally just working harder than you do nowadays. I think a lot of people will have been hanging out, by night time,
Yes, now of course in 1837 and right up to the dawn of the 20th century, it wasn't electric lights we're talking about. It was gas lights, literally lit by a man with a pole with a flame on the end, walking around and manually lighting each gas lamp individually. Yeah. So as you say, the light that they would have projected would have been infantile compared to the light that we think of when we think of street lights. And of course, that sort of flickering light creates shadows as you were walking down the street, or with all the gas lamps flickering away, that would have made shadows jump. And all of this together can, create illusions and hysteria and people just not seeing what was actually there.
Yeah. I mean, from a paranormal perspective, there isn't any other characters similar to Spring Heel Jack. Obviously, I've mentioned the Mothman, which is similar, but it's not similar. The Mothman, and the Owl Man of Mornon, they're actually seen as creatures, almost like gargoyle-like creatures, than actually physically humans that have all these, powers, especially like the breathing fire and the ability to jump over walls. So there isn't anything else that's appeared other than other sightings of Spring Heel Jack. There's hundreds and thousands of Sasquatches. There's loads of Chupacabras. But Spring Heel Jack is such a unique thing that...
Yeah, I think the nearest I can think of off the top of my head is the Slender Man myth legend which is quite a modern myth, quite a modern legend. I believe it was created on the internet by a horror website.
It was, Creepypasta.
Yeah,
that's right.
Decided to create a modern myth. So the Slender Man has some similarities, but no, it doesn't have that jumping ability, that ability to climb walls, etc. He just gets very tall, I believe.
So he was really, Spring Heel Jack, what I would say, is the first superhero.
Yeah, or supervillain. Yeah,
supervillain. Yeah, mixed both. I mean, he could have been a hero. He might have been picking on bad people. You don't know.
There's probably a cosplayer somewhere that fell into a portal and ended up in Victorian London and is so angry and freaked out that he only has the ability to run up to people, scream, grope the breasts and run away again.
Yeah. Would it be amusing if there was some sort of time loop where this guy went to this comic convention dressed as a steampunk Batman, fell into a portal, actually appeared in Victorian times, and thought, hang on, this isn't how I thought Victorian times was completely freaked out and he's now lost his mind. And he's running around the streets of London as a Batman cosplayer, It's like
Freddie's Greasy Spoon time slip from the last show.
Could be all associated.
But with a steampunk Batman cosplayer who...
He might have cracked it.
Yeah. There's probably a portal somewhere down some, I don't know, probably at the NEC in Birmingham.
NEC, yes.
In the men's toilets.
Yeah, around the back of the men's toilets. If you go around there, you'll fall into the time stream and emerge in 1837.
Oh, if only.
If only, yes.
Spring Heel Jack could have been from Birmingham because it said he appeared to speak English, but it's indecipherable. So it could have been from Birmingham.
What a charm. So I think it will always remain a mystery who Spring Heel Jack is, but he is one of the most enduring legends of London, and he's seen a bit of a revival now purely through the steampunk and as we've discussed before, the whole superhero scene and at the moment, the geek chic.
Yeah.
So, maybe more will come to light, who knows, but he's definitely food for thought.
He deserves his day back in the limelight.
He's due a movie or at least a cameo in Penny Dreadful, that's for sure.
Oh, definitely, 100%. Was he in Doctor Who? Because a friend of mine said that he was.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't really watch Doctor Who. Well, not since I was a child, but
I can't think of the top of my head. Perhaps I'm sure there's viewers now screaming at their MP3 player, going what the episode was, but I can't think off the top of my head.
No, I don't know whether he was. I mean, someone who is a Doctor Who fan told me that he was in one of the more recent episodes.
Right.
I'm surprised no one's actually hoaxed something recent. I mean, nowadays, if you're going to jump around dressed like that in London, you've got to risk getting your head kicked in, I suppose, if you're going to jump out. I saw these... it's like a gum shield that goes in your mouth, but when you bite down on it, it illuminates your whole mouth in different colours, and you can pick like from red, yellow, and you can get a blue one. So if you put this gum shield in your mouth and bite on it, it makes the whole of your inside of your mouth and your teeth glow blue. And then what you can do is on a really cold night, when it gets sort of about -5 in winter, if you put the blue gum shield in your mouth and breathed out, you would get like an illuminated blue mist coming out of your mouth. So
yeah, that'd be good.
Wow.
But you're restricted to doing it in winter, otherwise this isn't going to work.
You could become Spring-Heel Jack quite easy now. I mean, you could get boots that are bouncy. I've seen them boots people run down the street with them, a bit like they look a bit like them legs that in the Paralympics have, but they've got springy. Do you know what I mean? They're boots like the boots they have, and they jump really high. I've seen kids with it on like videos and all this. You could have that. You could get a cloak. You could get goggles that let up. You could have the gum shield in there, and you could have some claws in your hand. You know what I mean? And you could be quite a convincing Spring-Heel Jack and jump really high as well.
The only problem is you wouldn't stick out though nowadays. If you were gonna be Spring-Heel Jack, especially around London during autumn and winter when it's party season. If it's not Halloween, it's something to do with bonfire night, and then you're on to Christmas straight away. So nearly every night in London on the run up from sort of October onwards is party night. So there's always fancy dress people out. So if you go out all rigged up, ready to scare people and get the new Spring-Heel Jack stories going again, I don't think people would bite it. They'd just say, "Oh, it's another, look."
Well, Jed, you're just a cosplayer.
It's a cosplay with springy boots on.
Unless you go somewhere remote, like hang around Highgate Cemetery, wait for some sort of adventurous kids at night to sort of like try and crash in the gates to get drunk and that, and jump out of them. Then that's the place to do it. Some really remote and scary place, I think.
Yeah.
You'd have to do it so you did something superhuman to make yourself stand out. You would literally have to have the ability to jump over a church, which would involve having a friend with a helicopter. And a lot of bungee elastic, and then again, it would be quite dangerous as well. But if you could pull it off, and you got say a group of 100 people to witness that, then you've definitely got a good Spring-Heel Jack hoax on your hands there. But it cost you a fortune.
Let's hope Dynamo's not listening to the show, because he'll probably do that on his next TV special.
He's quite skinny. He'd fit in the suit, but I don't think he's got he doesn't seem sort of bubbly enough to be Spring-Heel Jack.
No, Spring-Heel Jack's just some personality.
Yeah. I mean, I think even if you did that, people who witnessed it would say something like, "Oh, they're obviously filming a TV show," or it's Dynamo doing some sort of trick or something. I think these days people are so cynical and are so used to seeing the unexplained on their TV screens and in movies and that it's very difficult these days to freak people out like that. I think
this way, if there was ever an alien invasion or a zombie apocalypse, you can guarantee for at least the first 2 or 3 days, people would just point at them and think, cosplayers, it must be International Zombie Day, or there's a load of little people wouldn't run away as aliens. They wouldn't. They're just
they'd stand there with their phones filming it, and then they'd stand there uploading it to Facebook or YouTube or Twitter. Meanwhile, the zombies would be descending upon them, and then after the first bite, they'd go, "Ow, what are you doing?" And then by the time they realised the threat was real, it'd be too late.
Maybe it's already happened and they just got bored, with the aliens. Yes. Maybe the aliens have already been. Spring-Heel Jack even, probably did a stint of scaring people over the last 2 or 3 years, but just got so bored with not actually getting a reaction, he's decided to go back to his rooftop crow-like place and carry on knocking out new romantic tunes on his synthesizers.
Isn't there a sign you can get for the people who put up in office blocks about if the fire alarm goes off, make your way to the nearest exit, etc., make your way to your fire point, and it actually says on it, "Do not look at your phone, do not update your Facebook status, just leave the building," because people escaping from a blazing building will be like texting or putting tweeting. Tweeting. OMG, building on fire.
Hashtag
to escape.
Hashtag burning.
And the thing is, just get your ass out of the building, leave your phone. But it's we've come to a strange place where everything has to be hashtagged and tweeted and Facebooked before you actually do something. You even take pictures of your dinner and put them up on Facebook.
And if it is the Illuminati controlling people by little devices, and they've got chips in there to get all your information about everything about you, control you, they're doing a good job of it. Because people are obsessed with their phones, and I think I've been on the news that some country has to have, on the street, when you walk down the street, have to have texting lanes.
Yes, I can't remember where that was. I saw that. There is a texting lane, where if you're going to text while walking, you have to go in the special lane, a bit like a cycle lane, but a texting lane.
Yeah, there's a great game. This is a sport that I do, and you know, it's worth playing. But I don't take responsibility for any sort of, you know, any trouble you may get into. But when I walk down the road and I see someone dawdling with their phone in their hand, texting or looking at Facebook in the middle of a street, and they're about to bump into me, what I do is I raise my arm just so I'm near them and try to knock it out of their hand. So when I walk down the high street from one end to the other, I see how many phones I can knock out of hands if they're coming towards me texting. So it's almost like a sport, you see. So at the end, I thought, I've got 10 today, or 5, not very good today. And it's quite good fun. But it's only if they're going to walk directly into you and crash into you without looking. So you don't go up to them and do it. It's only if they're walking right into your path and not looking where they're going, you just hand up. And it's quite good fun, yeah. It's a modern sport. It should be an Olympic sport, I think that could be.
Yes.
Yeah, it sounds a bit like something the stuntman out of Kentucky Fried Movie would do.
Yes.
Don't try it if you live in a rough area. That's what I'd say.
Yes. Exactly. Or if you're weedy, if you're big, and if the size of, I don't know, who's quite big, I don't know.
The Hulk.
The Hulk. If you're the size of the Hulk, then you can do as much as you like, you know. So, but it's fun. But it's only if they're going to crash into you, unless you move out of the way, that's when you do it. That's the rules of the game. But you don't just go up to someone and go push you. If they're walking directly into you and they're about to hit you, bump into you, then you can move out. It's going to scratch your head or something like that and push. And it goes, you know. But the thing is, these days, muggers must find it so easy because people are so distracted by their mobile phones. It'd be so easy to snatch a bag.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is.
Although I did see somewhere that people obviously complain about people texting and looking on Facebook on their phones, etc., and not interacting with people around them. Somebody put up a photo that was taken in the 1970s on a train, and everybody sat there on the train with a newspaper in front of their face. So it's not actually a new phenomenon, although the walking down the street is. But on trains, etc., everybody used to have a newspaper, and everybody's head would be buried inside that newspaper.
Well, yeah, it used to be reading books. I mean, I remember being in London before mobile phones, and people just used to read paperback books, and you had the same problem then. You'd have people physically walking along like Oxford Street reading a novel.
Yeah.
You know, anything to prevent human interaction. It's something that's always been there, especially in crowded places, especially with British people. I think British people are, on the surface, naturally antisocial. You know, you only have to go on the underground and smile at someone to... and then have them look at you and think, oh my god, he's a psychopath, he's going to kill me.
What's he want? What's he after?
Yeah, and it's always been there. So if you're just replacing like for like, but with new technology, it's always been there, and it's just that people always blame the newest thing that they can pin the blame on. So
I think in a situation you don't know anybody, like you're on a train, I think people feel a bit self-conscious, and that's why they used to read papers and stuff like that. But I've seen people go out for a meal with their friends, all sitting around a table, every single one looking at their phones. Yeah,
that's true. That's absolutely true. I went out for a meal with my kids on New Year's Eve. We went to a restaurant and we were sat around the table chatting, and next to us on the next table there was a family of about 6 or 8, and they'd obviously all gone out New Year's Eve, special occasion. Everybody was dressed up nice, and every one of them was looking at their phone or their iPad. And just not interacting at all. And I thought, isn't it sad? Even on New Year's Eve, you can't just put your phone down and talk to each other.
It's mad, isn't it? And I always wonder these days, can people read? I mean, because like everyone, I upset a lot of people the other day on Facebook because Game of Thrones, isn't it a series of books?
It is, but it's kind of gone beyond that now.
Oh, is it? I didn't realise that. I thought you could go in a bookshop and find out what happens anyway. But people get very upset about things like that, if you spoil it for them, which did. But it's like the thing is people these days are very insular, and that's what I find about human interaction. It's people at home, they've got their Netflix, they've got their TV, they've got the internet, they've got their iPads, they've got everything they need. There's no reason to step out of their house and talk to people.
Yeah, that's why all the pubs have closed in Britain. There's very few pubs doing well these days. Whereas 20, 30 years ago, the pub was the hub of everybody's social interaction. You went out to meet other people. Now there's no reason to leave the house. Why would you want to leave the house? You've got everything you need.
And they're more like restaurants that serve beer now. If you go into these Wetherspoons and they serve food, it's more like going for a meal, having a beer. It's not all the same. There's no piano and all that, or quiz nights. There's not much of that. And
I don't think any pub could survive these days, really, apart from outside perhaps central London. I don't think many pubs could survive these days purely on beer sales, like they used to. It's the food these days,
Yeah, all my old haunts of when I was younger, they're all gone, they're all closed down and boarded up. And it's a shame. People don't want to interact anymore. And it seems people are, although there's communication via the internet, Facebook. There's communication of a kind, but it's losing its humanity. People don't care. It's like if you post something on Facebook about a natural, real, genuine tragedy that's happened, few people will comment on it or say anything. But if someone from like Game of Thrones dies, there's grown adults sort of saying, "Oh, I'm so upset because the so-and-so's died. Oh, it's devastating. It's ruined my whole series for me." Oh, and they're more upset about a fictional character. And I think people are very much dissociated. They become very infantile. They're getting so attached to these things. It's all right to watch these things, but they get so immersed into it that that's become their life. Yeah. And there's no real world outside the window. So everything they view, all their life experience is basically sitting in one room looking at a screen rather than going outside and experiencing real things. It just seems very odd these days. There's a lot of that going on.
I think as well, people don't know when things happen in the real world, such as there's some tragedy in Pakistan or Syria where there's bombs going off and people being executed, etc. People don't know how to react to that because they're scared of, because we live in a very PC world these days. People don't want to be perceived as being racist or anti this or anti that. So if somebody puts something up on Facebook saying, "Isn't it terrible what happened, in Syria when these girls got killed?" You get very few people commenting on it because they're not sure how they're supposed to react, because they don't want to be seen as not PC. They don't want to be seen to be judgmental, so they just don't mention it. So then they can focus all of their attention on TV shows and games, etc. If you put a post up about a TV show, you'll get hundreds of comments, people liking it. But you put something up that happened in the real world, and you don't get that same. It doesn't attract the same interest because people don't know how to deal with it. They don't want to be seen to be this or that or the other, so they just shy away from it. And it's easier to put all of your focus into fictional worlds.
Yeah, well, I think that is a good point, and that is why I think what happened on the build up to the election, everyone was saying Labour are going to win, because when people asked what they were going to vote, they were voting for the most sort of left wing thing that seemed politically correct. Okay, on immigration, you'll give money to people who are out of work and all that. Yeah, when it came to actually putting your mark on the paper secretly and put it in the box, everyone thought, well, yeah, actually we do need to sort out immigration, and I'm not paying for some, woman who's had 30 kids to stay at home all day while I pay my taxes. And that's why that's why the Conservatives won, because just people were just too afraid to actually say what they really thought.
People were.
It's a pose, it's a fitting in kind of thing. It's like there's always like a current thing to get annoyed about each week, and people have to be seen to be outraged by it on social media. So if someone's saying, "I'm going to vote Conservative," people would sort of condemn them and say, "Oh, you Tory bastard," and all that. But it's easier for them to say, "Yeah, vote," and all this kind of be right on. And like you say, when they're in the booth, it's a different thing altogether. There's a lot of comedians I've got on my Facebook, and a lot of them are very openly sort of saying they're Labour, they're left wing and stuff like that. But a lot of them are from rich families, so they don't want to upset Daddy's trust fund. So when they get in there, they think, do I vote Labour or do I tick Conservative to make sure my money's all right? Yeah. So that's what tends to happen. I think a lot of this political stuff on Facebook and social media is a pose rather than someone genuinely being concerned. And an example of that is the Ice Bucket Challenge. It's a charity that they were highlighting awareness of that for a while, and now nobody cares about that charity. Nobody focuses, nobody mentions it. But suddenly it was the thing because it was fashionable. It was the cause to jump on.
Yeah. Social media for you, though. That's the way it works. And
but it's a shame because that charity thought, bloody hell, quid's in it. People are giving us a bit of exposure, and then now they just drop like a hot stone. Thrown away. That's the thing I find frustrating about that sort of thing. If you believe in it, but believe in it. If you don't, leave it alone.
Well, there you go. I mean, how many paranormal corners can you come across? I guarantee anyone listening in now who looked for any topic on Spring Hill Jack won't have heard an hour's worth of not only Spring Hill Jack, but British politics, new romantic music, the Black Bantam, Paul Bell scaring people in his costume when he was a kid, and we kind of covered all those angles there. So
exactly, and come up with the Spring Hill Jack and the new romantic connection.
That's right. There was a connection at the end. We made it work.
We did.
Sussed it out, yeah.
So we've got to let Paul go now, I'm afraid, because he's got to go ice skating in a oilskin suit with a cape and red eyes.
My private time is my own business.
Yeah.
Spring Hill Paul.
Well, thanks for joining us anyway, Paul.
No, that's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And, great to have you, as always, mate.
Yeah, cheers, and best of luck with everything.
I'm sure you'll be back on the show again soon, because you and I are off to the East Coast Spirit Convention sessions. That's in the US in January, aren't we?
We are indeed, yes, looking forward to that.
Yeah, we'll do a lot of podcasting and interviews and bits and bobs from there. So yeah, me and Paul are heading over to the US to take our particular brand of bizarreness over to our friends in the US. So it should be good fun.
Yeah,
fabulous.
Look forward to it.
Well, good luck ice skating.
Thank you.
Take care, mate. All the best.
Cheers. Yep. And speak to you soon.
Take care. And we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back in a moment.
Blackula, the Black Avenger, rising from his tomb to fill the night with horror. Blackula, Dracula's soul brother, deadlier even than he.
You know, he is a strange dude.
You're the nut that ran in front of my cab. You're the only imbecile on this street. Boy.
Blackula.
Hello and welcome back. And as we're coming towards the close of episode 10, and thank you for listening. Yeah, but there's a few things we'll discuss before we go. Is people out there that do collect weird objects, or one thing that is I always find that people they don't focus upon is the presentation of it, or what sort of box it's kept in. Do you know what I mean? It's like if you have someone who's got like something like a shrunken head or some very old artifact, you know, and they keep it in a shiny brand new box, it somehow destroys the atmosphere, the ambience.
It does.
Yeah, that's what I feel. Yeah, and I saw somebody actually once selling boxes, and they'd aged them and made them look really old, but they were selling for quite a lot of money, about £100. Do you know what I mean, for these boxes? But I found if you go to antique shops or like car boot sales, you can find genuine Victorian boxes that smell. They've got the smells intact, the looks intact. They are genuinely old boxes. Yeah, and you get them fairly cheap. You know, I bought about 5 of them for under £20. You know, and some of these are really old Victorian boxes. One of them is it's weird, like a sort of thing that would have been like a musical box before. We had kept stuff inside it, but the musical bit had been taken off. The box is so old, it just looked like it had been sat in someone's loft. For about 100 years. Hay fever. Yeah, it just looked like something had been sat in someone's loft for 100 years. This really manky old box. It stank the high heaven. And I thought, that's fantastic. You know, most people would see it as tat. Most people see it as stuff to be thrown away. But if you're someone who's a performer or a collector of strange things or exhibit strange things, these things are gems. They add so much atmosphere, don't they?
They do. Yeah, I've got a studio full of them. Every time I see them, I pick them up. You know, I've got old cutlery canteens, writing slopes, sewing boxes. You name it. If I see them, I just pick them up. I mean, most people know one of my effects called Abeline's Repository. The first few copies of Abeline's Repository were actually boxes that I made. And, okay, great. You know, everything method-wise works exactly the same. But what happened is I actually started making Abeline's Repository out of genuine antique boxes. And every single one is unique. Which is great. It just means that every person who buys it isn't getting something the same as someone else, which is a big problem in the magic world. You know, if you're going to perform something, that the audience saw it 2 weeks previous because someone else had bought exactly the same thing. When you're going to create an effect or a prop in a unique thing, something unique such as a box, it makes it different from everything else that everyone else has seen. So, yeah, Abeline's Repository now is made out of antique sewing boxes. So I'm always on the prowl for them. And they obviously come in varying degrees of condition. So a lot of them do take a bit of renovation. But as Freddie said, why spend hours and hours building a box and aging it to make it look old when you can literally go out and pick up a genuine Victorian antique that smells as it should and looks as it should. And it's one of the biggest tips I've got in prop design is why spend hours looking for something that is making something that is old or making it to look old when you can actually just go out and pick the real thing up from an antique dealer. Obviously, you learn you'll learn certain things of how to age metals and how to age paper and how to age wood, and that is all really useful things. You know, it's a great thing to know and add to your repertoire of skills. But for set dressing and creating, for creating your stage, essentially, you might as well just opt for the real thing, because it's out there. There are some things that you just can't get that are old, like Freddie said, mummified heads or shrunken heads and these types of things, but they're specific props. I mean, but if you do look hard enough, you will find the real thing, but you'll pay a fortune for them.
Yeah.
So, I think, as a closing tip for all you budding magicians and performers out there is, if you're looking for something, get down to your local antique store and get digging around, and you'll find something perfect, which will cost you half the price and half the time.
Yeah, even car boot sales and even eBay. If you're looking for authentic Victorian things, you can look around and find them, and sometimes quite cheap. Yeah,
it's definitely the way to go. But I think on the next show we'll cover a bit more in the world of props, prop design, because we've not actually discussed what we're going to do next show. So it's what happens in episode 11 is going to be a surprise for us as well as you. But if you've got any suggestions of things you'd like Freddie and I to cover, then just drop us a line at the Mystic Menagerie Podcast via the Facebook page, or just via Twitter. And if you've got any suggestions, let us know, and we'll be pleased to talk about anything you want us to
any
talk
ideas
about.
of what you want us to discuss. And we have a few ideas.
Yep.
Anything, any subjects you think we want us to investigate or discuss, just drop us a line on the Facebook page, email, Twitter, and we shall bring that up for you. We shall cover that. So we want you to be interactive with the show and talk about the things you want to hear about as well. So any sort of strange things you want us covered, we're there.
Yeah, and as always, thanks for listening, and get those reviews rolling in. Get us up the iTunes charts, and as next month we'll also do another prize draw for the reviews. And thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Yep, thank you. Take care. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.
Spring Hill Jim winks an eye. He'll never be done to. He takes on who